for spacious skies, for amber waves of gray, for purple mountains' majesties, above the fruited plain. Oh, America, God shed His grace on thee. Oh, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
Every time I hear that song, I get tears in my eyes and think of patriotic thoughts, and that was a beautiful rendition. Hello, I'm Gary Jobson, and we are continuing our celebration of Sail Forth, the 250th birthday of the United States of America. And what a birthday we had yesterday on July 4th. We had dozens and dozens of tall ships in the harbor. We had wave after wave of planes, vintage planes, modern planes, military planes, cargo planes, and of course fighter jets. It was spectacular. And at the end of the day, after all of that, we had the Macy's firework display on both the East River and on the Hudson River. It was spectacular. I'm still recovering, and I bet lots of you are too. And that celebration wasn't just here in New York. It was all around the United States. Washington, D.C. had a monstrous firework display after the rain passed through last night, after the president's speech. And across the country, the red, white, and blue was proudly shown, and America can be proud. 250 years. We've got an exciting show for you today. We're going to look back at some of the ships that we have been able to visit over the past couple days and do a deeper dive than we saw yesterday. Yesterday was a parade, and we kept it that way. Today we're going to talk to some of the people that are aboard these boats and how they run, and we've got a historical expert to help us decipher all of this, and hopefully you'll get some great facts and tell others to log on, because we got plenty of information here over the next 3 hours. So yesterday and again today, down on the pier, Ayo Haynes is joining us. Ayo has been talking to lots of people and getting the view from the waterfront. I'm a little jealous in the studio, but Ayo, how are you today, and how's the weather, and who do you have with you? It looks like you have a family with you.
Yeah, I am doing amazing. Yesterday was so incredible. My first time at the Intrepid and celebrating 250 years of our country with fanfare in the air, on the water. It was incredible. I actually was so tired yesterday. I went home and conked out because of the sun. But today I'm revived. I'm here with the great family, the royal family, by the way. What better name for our first guest today here at the Intrepid, celebrating 250 years with the country. So we have April.
Hi.
Hi. And we have Kevin.
Chris, hi.
Chris. You know what? I called him Kevin before. I don't know where Chris that came from. It is Chris Royal, and he's with his 3 kids. What's your name?
JJ.
JJ? Yeah. Okay.
Liam.
And
It's Ellie.
Ellie. And so they're here with us. Is this your first time visiting the Intrepid?
This is our first time, and I am so thrilled to be here on America's 250th birthday to see these incredible sailing ships.
What is it like to bring your family here?
Oh, it's fantastic. Just watching all the reactions, all the gasps and the little yells and the running around. It's great.
Did you come here as a kid yourself?
Yeah, long time ago.
What do you think it means to have your family here celebrating a momentous day like this? They're very young right now, but I'm sure you have pictures, you'll have this video. What is it going to mean to them later, do you think?
I keep telling them it's once in a lifetime. The last time these ships were here was before I was born, and I remember hearing about that from my parents when I was about their age. So it's, you'll be grown, baby, before these ships come back and we see something like this again. It's really something remarkable for us to share as a family.
I can imagine. As we'll see, as we turn the cameras around later on, this place is packed. We have families, we have sailors coming off the ships. It's a veritable festival here. It's so electric. But I want to find out from you, what do you think about all of this? You don't know? What do you think he's thinking inside?
I think he's a little overwhelmed. I think there's a lot to look at and a lot to see, and he's really excited.
Have you seen any of the ships yet?
We've just been walking around just looking from the shore, and it's just amazing. We've read so much about pirate ships with the boys, and it's finally the age of sail, and I think they're absolutely stunned.
Yes, I'm sure. And it's a little hot for them, so they're getting a little distracted, but they have been so good. This is the perfect place for children to explore, to learn what tall ships are, to learn what a sailor's life is. And if you're still at home, come on down, because you'll be so surprised at all the adventures that await you here. So, Gary, do you have any questions for the royal family?
Well, I'm curious where they're from, where the royal family lives.
Where are you from?
We're from Rockaway, New Jersey.
Okay, so they might have actually seen some of the tall ships at Sandy Hook, maybe on your way.
We did not make it down to Sandy Hook yesterday because we were at the Montclair, New Jersey parade with our little kiddos, but we would have loved to.
Were you able to see the fireworks at all?
No, we missed them. There was a lot of storms going on.
Yeah, well, here we actually got a great chance to see the fireworks. I was with my daughter on Pier 14. And Gary, I'm not sure if you can see, but we have an incredible backdrop behind us. We have the Amerigo Vespucci right behind us. Take a look. So you know it's so easy to spot with that black and white hull. It's called the most beautiful ship in the world, and we have it as our backdrop for the rest of the day. I think that's pretty special.
Well, it's a great backdrop, and it's got a very unique paint job with the alternate black and white stripes there. It's pretty special. Well, Ayo, we'll check in with you in a little while here, and we'll let the family go take a look. I have a feeling they'd like to get on one of these vessels here this afternoon. Our next
sounds good. See you soon.
See you soon. Our next report, we're going to talk a little bit about the United States Coast Guard vessel, the Eagle. The Eagle is a 290-foot long boat. It is the training boat of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, and every officer that comes out of the Academy since 1946 has spent time on this vessel, the U.S. Coast Guard Eagle. And a couple of years ago, I got a chance to get on board and talk with the captain at the time, who was Captain Eric Jones. So we're going to take a little look at what the Eagle was like just a few years back. And after that, we're going to talk to Captain Jones, or now Admiral Jones. He got promoted a little bit along the way. And take a little bit more modern take on the value of the Eagle and training Coast Guard officers. So with that, let's take a look at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy's Eagle.
In 1946, America's tall ship, the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Eagle, launched with its first round of cadets. Now, that was an exciting year as World War II had just ended the previous year. So we have all kinds of political events happening, from the first meeting of the United Nations. We have Harry Truman is president at that time, and we have events like Winston Churchill's very famous speech in which he popularizes the term the Iron Curtain. This was a speech that is seen as one of the opening volleys of what will become the Cold War. But amidst all of this political activity, we also have a lot happening on the social scene and what we might think of as pop culture. First of all, we have the invention of Tupperware. The patent for Tupperware's iconic burping seal was officially granted in 1949, a couple of years after this. And Tupperware became so popular, sold in Tupperware parties, that they actually closed stores because they no longer needed it. At the same time that Tupperware was coming out and becomes part of the iconic 1940s, 1950s culture, we also have the arrival of the bikini. Now, two-piece swimsuits had started in the 1930s. They became popular first in Europe, and then we see them arriving in the United States during World War II when we were attempting to ration clothing material. But we have the official arrival of the bikini, which was considered only genuine if it could be pulled through a wedding ring, according to its French designer.
Hand salute. The colors of a ship, like the U.S. Coast Guard Academy's Eagle, are always honored when you leave or arrive aboard the ship. It's departure day. Anticipation is running high. Captain Eric Jones has been the Eagle's commanding officer for nearly 4 years.
Anytime we have folks visit Eagle, we always get the question, why in the world would you be sailing a ship whose technology was at its peak in the late 1800s and expect that to train a modern officer? And we directly teach skills such as firefighting and damage control, navigation. Those skills we can teach on here just like any other cutter in the fleet. But having a square rigger with 23 sails to handle, 139 lines, it allows the upper class cadets to organize the underclass cadets, and it becomes a leadership laboratory, because to tack the ship, to wear the ship, which is the equivalent of a jibe on Eagle, takes manpower being in the right place at the right time. And the cadets are forced to learn to coordinate, communicate, and lead. And that's where sail training is the means to an end.
The value is twofold. As an underclass, it's mainly to get the experience as a junior enlisted and find what it's like to come together and bond as a class. We have half the class on board at a time, and they come together really well. They become more of a family. It's a common element that they all share within their summer experience, so that they can have that when they get back to the academy to share stories, talk about events, talk about what they've done. And then as upper class, we live the junior officer life, so it's a way to transition us into the actual Coast Guard fleet, and we'll be ensigns. And it's an opportunity for us to work on our leadership abilities, hone our leadership skills, as well as work on qualifications that we'll need once we graduate.
Currently, every cadet will spend at least 6 weeks on Eagle, and those that come back in the upper class roles can spend as much as 19 weeks total. And all officer candidates that attend our officer candidate school also go to sea for 2 weeks on Eagle.
Well, that's a nice report by Captain Jones and talking to some of the cadets there at the Coast Guard Academy. And you can see how important it is. Now, clearly, we don't have tall ships involved in our active service and patrolling the coast and doing rescues. But the lessons you learn on one of these vessels really pays off, and you're prepared for anything. So if you can handle a sailboat, you can certainly handle a boat with a lot of power. So the Eagle, after being in New York, took off on a voyage. And when you leave on a voyage, the word that mariners use is departure. You hoist the flag up and you leave the coast, and we caught up with Eagle as it was leaving New York. And you can imagine the anticipation of the cadets and the officers and the crew aboard that finally we're heading out to sea. New York, with all the excitement, is going behind, and soon it'll be quiet, just the ship and the crew and everybody performing their task. So with that, let's take a little look at what life is aboard Eagle as it makes departure from New York City.
One of the great moments on any ship is making departure. The Eagles had a great stop here in New York City. Next stop, Norfolk, and then up Chesapeake Bay to celebrate the War of 1812 in Baltimore.
The first step in making departure is the navigation briefing for the cadets and officers.
We've had a wonderful time here in New York, but like all ports, heading back out to sea and get some sailing and what I'm looking forward to.
The crew dons harnesses before climbing the rig. The sails are prepared to be unfurled once the ship is out in the ocean. The first task is to single up the lines as the boat is maneuvered away from the dock with the help of two tugs and a docking pilot. The cadets are in charge. The final lines are hauled aboard. The tug comes alongside. At the helm, the cadets are ready. The colors are hoisted.
Engine back 1/3!
Engine back 1/3 line!
And the Eagle leaves the dock.
Sir, my engine answer's back 1/3!
Two tugs and the engine. No sails as yet.
Rudder midship pipe! That's well. Rudder midship!
We're going to shoot the Empire State Building, that's Victor Alpha Golf.
Okay.
And then if you lose contact, then we can go and shoot Victor Alpha Delta, which is the southern tip of
Pier 78. Pier 78.
Yeah.
Piloting up the Hudson River starts immediately.
Engine head 1/3 eye!
That's what.
Captain Jones likes what he sees.
Solomon, engine ahead 2/3!
The view from the bridge. Navigation takes place on deck.
30 seconds.
The Coast Guard still uses paper charts. Progress is recorded in the log.
Gary, 210, check 419.
What's our speed?
7.9 knots.
An ensign works with the cadets.
20, I guess.
And we're underway. The breeze builds, sailing is ahead. The cadets go aloft to prepare the sails. When you watch the cadets on the Coast Guard ship Eagle, you get a real sense of calm, but everything they do has precision outlined as part of it. So they're calm, but they're precise, and that's what you want to be to have an officer. And it looked like great fun. Of course, they left on a nice weather day as they went down to Norfolk. I think they had a little bit of tougher weather after that, but it was all part of the learning experience. And you might have enjoyed our previous package when Captain Eric Jones was in charge, and I loved his enthusiasm about how much he loved his job. Well, he continued his career in the U.S. Coast Guard and eventually was promoted to become a Rear Admiral, and he retired a couple years ago, and now he is the head of the California Maritime Academy out in Vallejo, California. And so he's still at it, training young people, shifting gears a little bit from the Coast Guard to the Merchant Marine. And I had a chance last week to sit down with now Admiral Jones to talk about the mission of the Coast Guard and what we should know about these tall ships. So with that, let's take a look and hear what Admiral Jones had to say. Well, we're lucky here to speak today with Rear Admiral Eric Jones, who had the distinction earlier in his career of being the commanding officer of the Coast Guard Eagle. and we got to sail together a few years back on that and talk about sailing. And anyway, let me kick off here, Admiral. And what's the value of sail training on a tall ship that will help a future officer, somebody, a cadet at the Coast Guard Academy in their future career?
Thanks for the question, Gary, and thanks for having me. Yeah, being able to take young folks out on the sea with all the challenges that a tall ship provides is a fantastic opportunity, because when we bring cadets into the Coast Guard Academy, their backgrounds are from all over the country, and many have never seen the ocean before. And the opportunity to be out there in the weather, to be working together. You have a lot of valedictorians and salutatorians whose accomplishments have been their own, and now they become part of a crew. They get to see how the weather and the elements affect the world they're living in, and then they get to harness them through those 22,000 square feet of sail.
Well, the Coast Guard doesn't have many sailing vessels anymore, a few around the Academy and, of course, the Eagle. How does it equate from sail to motorized vessels?
What you need to keep in mind is that we need all Coast Guard officers to fundamentally be solid mariners. And then we overlay the Coast Guard's missions, whether they're law enforcement, search and rescue, incident response, migrant or drug interdiction. And so by putting them on Eagle, we build those foundational mariner skills: navigation, damage control, emergency response, ship handling. And the mission they have while they're on Eagle is sailing the ship, harnessing the wind, working as a team, because all 139 lines have to be handled manually. 2 of them can be handled with 1 person. Most of them take 4 people to 16 people to handle. And so we create that space in their head to lay the mission of sailing Eagle on top of all their base mariner skills. When they graduate, they can set that aside and make room to bring the Coast Guard missions in, built on that strong foundation.
Well, it must be something from a cadet from, say, Nebraska or Iowa that never been on the ocean before. Now they're on this tall ship, and I think they probably quickly learn a few valuable things about A, teamwork, and B, leadership out there.
Absolutely. And we actually have the program designed so that we have a large number of third-class cadets, which would be your sophomores, usually about 120, and then 20 or so first-class cadets, your seniors. And the seniors are literally put in junior officer positions, while the 120 third-class cadets are serving in the basic rates, learning their way around the ship, helping with meal preparations and cleanups, providing some of the raw labor, but that's okay because they get exposed to it. And the following summer, they actually get out on our Leadership 44s, those Morris yachts taken from the Navy 44 design, to get them out where they all get to have firsthand experience in handling sail and really getting a focused look at it. So the opportunity on Eagle gives them both an exposure to sailing and large ship operations, and is complemented that following summer. And then a select group get to come on as the leaders when they come to Eagle. When you're working on deck, it's a lot of teamwork, but you could imagine going into the rig as a bit of a personal crucible to get up into that rigging and handle sails when we're furling or letting loose the sails to be set. That one can be a bit of an individual overcoming of the anxiety of going up into the rig.
You know, I think it's important to note that the United States Naval Academy has 16 44-footers, maybe a slightly different design than you have at in New London. But they really valuable in Annapolis, the value of sail training and making better naval officers as well, which I think speaks volumes for the relatively small boats compared to the Eagle. I also bet the Naval Academy would like to have their own Eagle, but they don't. They can watch the Coast Guard. So let's talk about the vessel a little bit. Let me just go through a series of questions here. so our viewers can understand what this is all about. And my questions are based on my own sailing on tall ships. And in fact, I did a transatlantic on the Stad Amsterdam, which is a relatively newer vessel, but about the same size. And we had to do all the things that the cadets had to do on the vessel. So how fast can the Eagle sail when it's all the sails are up and you got a good breeze?
If you have a good breeze and things are just right, you can get just shy of 18 knots on Eagle.
So that's pretty fast. You're covering a lot of miles in a short period of time. So when I was on Stad Amsterdam, I had to do it, and I wasn't that young at the time, but I went all the way up the mast, and I had to do it at least one time. And I actually got a little nervous. I've been up at a lot of masts over the years, but not that high. How do you get a cadet who might have a little height of fear of heights, has never been up a rig like that? How do you convince them you too can do this?
We start early on when they get on the ship. These days, obviously, the equipment they use is far more advanced. When I was a cadet, we had a single waist belt with a single snap hook tether. Now they are in full climbing gear, both thigh and shoulder harnesses, and they've got 2 hooks. And right when they're at the pier, we go through a school of the ship. And part of that school of the ship, besides learning how to get out of your berthing area with your eyes masked, is doing an up and over in the rigging pier side, where you literally go up to the first platform, the tops, and down the other side. Because, and I know you know this, Gary, when you come up to either of the platforms, the tops or the cross trees, you come to the futtock shrouds, which actually you're leaning over backwards, and that really can be that can be the deciding point for a lot of folks. And so we do everything we can to avoid peer pressure, because we know the students are putting themselves under a lot of it. But we let them take their time. If they need to take a moment to stop, clip in, get their bearings, and then we encourage them to do it pier side. And then once we get out to sea, we look for opportunities when they're working on the deck to simply make that same trip up again. And then you find over time there will always be some cadets that are willing to go out to the main yard or maybe the lower top yard, and there are those that'll go all the way to the Royal.
Well, I remember experiencing that kind of climbing backwards, but when the person ahead of you's done it and there's somebody behind you, somehow you find a way to overcome that fear. And going out on the yard I only went about halfway out with the group that I was there. I didn't get all the way out, but I found it really cool. And there's an old expression that you read in the Jack London novels: one hand for yourself and one hand for the ship. I think that's something that all mariners understand.
That, yep, absolutely applies on the ship. And as a matter of fact, when they're in the rigging, we really try to encourage them to have 3 points of contact. So you're only moving one hand or 1 foot at a time. And with having the double clips, they're able to stay clipped in as they step out onto a yard and get ready to either cast loose or furl sail.
I think the top speed we had on the Stad Amsterdam when I was on it, and we left New York and went all the way to Cowes and Isle of Wight, about 15.5. But we would sustain that for mile after mile. It was really stuff. Plus we had the Gulf Stream giving us another 2.5 knot boost. So we were, like you say, making about 18 knots, which is great for morale. Going fast like that. So
no, and it's a lively ride.
Yeah. You know, I like to use the expression on racing yachts that, listen, gang, no job is too big or too small on this boat. All of us get our hands dirty and do the little things. And my expression with a crew, especially a greener crew, is if everybody does just a little bit more than expected of them, everything's going to be really good. Do you agree to that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think there's that old saying that if you're going to be an officer on any ship anywhere, you've got to be willing to do any job that you'd ask someone else to do. I just came off of 10 days on a Cal Poly Maritime's training ship, the Golden Bear.
Oh.
And And the same thing applies. Those third class cadets are learning everything from cleaning bilges to chipping paint, and working in the scullery cleaning dishes, because if they're going to be officers and lead folks that are doing that sometimes never fun work, and particularly tough when you're in 18-foot seas, you got to be able to come from a position that you've been there, done that.
I think it was about 15 years ago, we had Buzz Aldrin, who of course was the captain of Apollo 13, come and speak at the Naval Academy, the midshipmen, and he was fascinating. So he was on the sailing team at the U.S. Naval Academy for all 8 semesters. He was part of the offshore sailing team, and he referred to the lessons that he learned on their 44s at the time. They were old yawls, helped him in space, which I thought was really valuable to the mids.
Oh, yeah, those Looters 44s, those are wonderful. And they're still sailing out of the Patuxent Naval Air Station, believe it or not.
It's fascinating. Well, I've been volunteer coaching at the Naval Academy, and I get over there in the fall and spring about once a week. And with the offshore team, 2/3 of the mids have never been on a sailboat before they came to Annapolis. But I must say, and I'm sure you could say it's the same up in New London, that they're very smart. They're all in shape. Everybody shows up on time. Nobody's late for practice. And they're like sponges. You say something, they got it, right away. If you take the spinnaker down and pull here, it's going to be a lot better than trying to, the next time they do it exactly right. So I find it really satisfying working with them.
No, and I'm sure you also were following. It was great to see both Naval Academy boats and the Coast Guard Academy's boat make Newport to Bermuda, and the Thrash to the Patch. They did a great job sailing that, and I know they're returning their boats right now.
Well, I've done 13 Newport to Bermuda races during my career, and it all seems good until you get into the Gulf Stream, and then it becomes real. With the cadets, and specifically ones that haven't done much on the water before getting to New London. Is there seasickness on the boat, or a way to overcome that with some of these young people?
Yes, seasickness is definitely part of going to sea.
I've been seasick too, so.
No, I was going to say when people tell me, "Oh, I've never gotten seasick," it's like there's a storm out there for everyone, and very, very few cadets, and I imagine it's the same with the midshipmen at Naval Academy. Very few do we have to send home because that we cannot overcome their seasickness. Most of them, if we can get them a good night's sleep in a decent seaway, that is just enough for their bodies to acclimate and be good unless the seas remarkably change. Now, we both know the funny stories of then when you finally do tie up and you watch a student stumble around on the pier because they're not quite ready for terra firma.
Well, I've had that almost every ocean race I've ever done. I get back on land and, whoa, what's going on here? It takes you about an hour to kind of get acclimated to dry land again. So New York Harbor, it's a big day. July 4th, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And the cadets are on the Eagle, which is really the pride of the entire flotilla, doing the parade past Governor's Island, another Coast Guard piece of property there in New York Harbor. What are the cadets thinking as they see a big crowd cheering them on today?
It is, for them, it is going to bring home why they're doing what they're doing. When you're caught up in that day-to-day of not getting enough sleep, rushing to eat your meal before you get on watch, putting on the same clothes you had yesterday, waiting for your opportunity to do laundry, a lot of it just drags into the routine and you really lose that big picture. But as they come into the harbor and they see the ships, and they're there with other tall ship sailors, and they see the Navy ships and everything that's going on in Manhattan and over in Brooklyn, they're going to swell with pride and suddenly realize what a unique opportunity is, and the fact that they're getting to showcase America's tall ship in this parade. I think back to 92 when we did the sesquicentennial for Columbus, and we had Walter Cronkite on board Eagle. And that was the last time 4 of the 5 German training ships were together. And so I get a little goosebumps thinking about it. So I'm excited for the cadets and for obviously the officers and crew as they get this opportunity to be part of such an amazing event. And what a wonderful international turnout it's been for it.
I got to do a Bermuda race with Walter Cronkite back in the early 1980s, and he was fascinating to be with. And he showed up in Newport and wanted to come sailing with us with Ted Turner in the 12s, and you'll love this. So he gets on the boat, we get away from the dock, we got the sails up, we're sailing along, and Walter Cronkite says to Ted Turner, "Hey, Ted, how about let me steer a little bit?" And without missing a beat, Ted Turner shoots back, "Sure, Walter, I'll let you steer if you let me do the evening news." Ted let him steer for about 20 minutes. I think Walter was in 7 heavens steering that 12-meter around. But
No
Walter
doubt.
loved sailing, and I'm sure that was a special thing for him being on the Eagle. And I'm sure he was very personable with everybody on board the boat.
Yeah, there was definitely officers were trying to get breakfast with he and Betsy, and just to hear that that iconic voice in a normal conversation, amazing.
You know, I did a film one time, and Walter Cronkite and I were the co-narrators. He said the first paragraph, and then I had to narrate the second paragraph. And when that voice came on, I felt like a rookie in Yankee Stadium, you know, when his first words were, "The America's Cup." I knew I was in deep trouble. Next to Walter Cronkite. I mean, he was such a master of using the English language. And I'm going to tell you a quick story here, and then we'll go on. So I did a show for ESPN. It was on the history of the America's Cup. And somebody from ESPN called and said, "You know, Jobson, you should be one of the competitors interviewed in your show and let somebody else narrate it." So I wrote a letter to Walter Cronkite. Would he narrate my project? And he said he'd be honored to. And he showed up with a jacket and tie in this studio in Lower Manhattan. And here were the last words that I had written for Walter to say. And it was the last television show he'd ever did in his life. And the words were, think of Walter Cronkite's voice. "Someone once wrote that the America's Cup is a synonym for things brave and big and famous. To those words, I would add one more, spectacular. No inanimate object is more beautiful than 2 America's Cup yachts racing bow to bow, sailing for glory and into our affections." And that's the way it is. And that's the way it was. How cool was that? I get tears in my eyes thinking.
Oh,
with his jacket and tie saying those words.
Nope, I can see why you have those committed to memory,
Oh,
Gary.
no, I haven't forgotten that one. You know, some passages stay with you forever. So let's wind up with this. You know, the Eagle's the star of the show, and it's very important. But we do have other vessels from around the world that are in New York Harbor, and I have to guess it's a thrill for the midshipmen and cadets and the crews of these other vessels being in New York and seeing the Statue of Liberty and all these other vessels from around the world. What do you think some of the thoughts are on some of these other vessels?
Oh, I mean, it's wonderful to see them. It really is quite the fraternity of Central America and South America. Really have a tight group. Over the last 15 years, they've done several circumnavigations of South America, and the Juan Sebastian del Elcano frequently comes from Spain, and they're always generous to invite Eagle to join them for any legs that can fit in with our training legs. So, as usual, they're making a great turnout. But to also see Mercia, one of Eagle's rarely seen sister ships, coming all the way from the Black Sea to join this. Gorschfach 2 from Germany, and of course Sagres 2 from Portugal. Wonderful to see them together. And if someone has the opportunity while they're there in New York, look to see how well the cadets and midshipmen from all the countries blend together. I guarantee you will see them together on Liberty. You'll see them on each other's ships because their curiosity is piqued to see how do the other countries do it. And they also get to take some pride that they're all sharing this same language, these same skills of handling these ships from a yesteryear.
Well, I hope we get some favorable wind on this week on July 4th, so everybody in the harbor can watch them sailing and just how cool these boats are. So, Admiral, thank you. We appreciate your words, and you've seen it all in your long career, and but you're still at it out the California Maritime Academy and still helping young people, and it's clearly in your blood and your passion.
No, and I appreciate it. Thank you for advocating for sailing, Gary, everywhere you go, and realizing that whether it's out on a laser or on a 400-foot four-masted bark, there are similarities and things that are shared among sailors, and we truly do create the best mariners when we teach them how to harness the wind and the elements.
Great. Thank you very much. Great to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
I feel quite lucky to have gotten time to spend with Rear Admiral Eric Jones, and you can see his passion he has to work with young people and mold them into be very competent officers we have in the U.S. Coast Guard, and now with Merchant Marine as well. So thank you, Admiral Jones. We really appreciate it. Well, let's go back down to the Intrepid dock. Ayo Haynes is down there. I think she's got a couple of guests. But before you get to the guests, I'm really curious. The parade yesterday, for you, what was the best part that you saw?
For me, we're watching the airplanes go by with the red, white, and blue exhausts. I've actually never seen that before, and it's my first time at an air ship or air, what do you call it? You know, an air show. Thank you. An air show. I've never seen that before, and it was so impressive.
It was fun watching it both land and sea and up in the air all at once. So you've got a couple of guests to introduce to us.
I do. They actually found us, which is so amazing because these are the kind of stories that we want to tell here. It's not just about the 250th anniversary, which happened yesterday, and we're going to be celebrating all weekend long. But Renata Grassi-Conti's story and the story of her daughter, Gabriella, goes back to their father and grandfather. And I'm going to let them tell it because it's quite remarkable.
So 40 years ago, I had the pleasure of being on this Vespucci naval ship for the celebration of the rededication of the Statue of Liberty. I was chosen somewhat, my family was, because my father, Guido, was an Italian naval veteran. He ran a club. The chapter was in New York. He ran the chapter of New York called ANMI. It stands for, it's an acronym for Associazione Nazionale Marinai d'Italia. And it consists of all naval veterans from Italy that have based themselves here in America. And there are several states that have these chapters. So my father was being honored. And in turn, the whole family was. And it was just such a beautiful experience. We were able to go on board the Vespucci for the whole evening, 4th of July.
And you were able to have dinner there, right?
We had dinner there. We had firework displays. I remember the sailors. We were so close to the fireworks that the sailors had mops and had to swab the deck after every single firework went off.
What year is this?
This was 1986, exactly 40 years ago. Exactly.
Amazing. So what is it like to share this kind of memory with your daughter?
Well, you see, this is wonderful.
I was not born yet. But no, it's great. Like, I grew up having the knowledge that my grandfather was in the Maritime my whole life and going to the dinner dances we had every year. And it's so special because my grandparents met at something like this when my grandpa was still in the Navy. And they were docked in Connecticut in New London. And they had one of those dinner dances. And my grandmother reluctantly went with her friend. She had been to a million of them before, and she didn't want to go to another one. But she went, and after many suitors asked her to dance, she wanted to go home, but then my grandpa tapped her on the shoulder. She turned around, and here we are. So it's always special when I get to be at things like this and to see the sailors, and like my grandpa was one of them once, and not having had him for like 16, 17 years now, it's nice to always like come back and feel like he's here with us, and we talk about him all the time. I'm wearing a lot of his I got a lot of his bling on. Like it's just one of those special things to be around.
Well, you know what, for me, is that obviously you've told this story to your daughter and to the other family members, and obviously he told it to you. So there's an oral history and tradition that's continuing with you all.
Yeah. And we try and live it, every day we remember my dad. And this was just an opportunity we could not pass up. He died few years, 18 years ago, but it's when you think of him and the life we had with him, it feels like yesterday. And coming here just brings us closer to him. And, we can't wait to get on the ship and take a tour. We've met some folks, some sailors here, and we're speaking to them in our, the best we can. And it's just been brilliant. It's been fantastic, and it brings me closer to my dad.
Are you old enough to have participated in or remember the bicentennial?
Yes, I did. And that was fabulous, too. That was fabulous. And this was 10 years later, this Statue of Liberty rededication ceremony. And it was, I tell my kids about it all the time because, and my husband, I had just met my future husband. Oh, no, we had been married 1 month. And it was, he couldn't believe it. He goes, "Who do you know?" I was like, "No, this is just for my dad." And and we were on the ship the whole evening. We felt like rock stars, and they made us feel very welcome. And they're doing the same now here. A very just classy bunch and wonderful bunch of sailors. And I talked to the commandant a little bit and told him about my dad too. And he was interested. It was very nice.
There's family pride here, obviously, and that just will continue to go with your children and their children. I can't even imagine what it feels like to have this kind of connection, not only to the day and celebrating the 250th birthday, but to Fleet Week and just having a connection to all the sailors that have dedicated their lives to the country.
Yeah, it's special that they're all here. I mean, we are Italian American. We're Italian and American, we always say. And so it's really special to have them here for 250 and to celebrate us being American, my grandpa coming over here and all of that, but then also our Italianness as well. So having the two things come together on this weekend has been really special for us, I think. Yeah.
I'm so glad you found us, and I'm so glad that you brought the pictures too, because that allows our viewers at home to see exactly who you're talking about. It's not just a name. You've actually brought them, your father and your grandfather, to life within those pictures for us. So thank you so much for...
You're very welcome. Very welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Gary, isn't that an amazing story?
It's a great story, really great fun. You have to ask for me, how was the Italian food aboard the Vespucci when they had dinner aboard the vessel?
So Gary, who's inside, Gary is a world-renowned sailor. He's asking, what was it like to be on board the Vespucci with the sailors having dinner?
So we felt like we were real insiders. I'll never forget, my mom was there, of course, and she was all proud because my father had just been awarded the title of Cavaliere. I don't know what the equivalent is here, but it's some type of honor for doing service to your country. Yeah. And my mother was so proud of him, and her only remark the whole evening, because she was in such awe, was, "This macaroni is a little hard. It's undercooked," yeah, and it was hysterical. And don't we still say that? I mean, they're both gone. They've both left us, my parents, but we still say that, you know. And it goes back to this ship and them serving us dinner. I mean, we were with, I don't know, you know, officials, political officials of Italy, political officials of the United States, of New York. We were in great company, you know, but we were still just, you know, Guido's kids hanging around, and you know, it was unbelievable.
Well, it sounds like Guido is still hanging around today. Like his spirit is here. I am sweating, like you probably can say, but it's only humid. It's actually not so hot. It's a beautiful day. Were you able to even watch the fireworks last night?
Yeah, we had a nice day, especially on Friday. We were able to meet up with some of the sailors at a local. They had moored in Sandy Hook Bay, and 60 of them came into the town where we live. So we were kind of goober-schmooching with them on Friday night. We were having a dinner, and they just came in, and it was fantastic.
I love that new word, uber-schmooching. So, Gary, we've been uber-schmooching with Renata and her daughter, Gabriella, and it's such a great story for today.
All right, well, we'll do some more uber-schmooching as the day goes on here. Thank you very much, Ayo, and please thank your guests on my behalf. So we're going to move on here from
I certainly will.
Italy and head down under to South America and have a little presentation of the Ayo Libertad. This is a boat from Buenos Aires, and they were here in the harbor, and very cool. Let's take a look.
In 1963, one of the largest and fastest tall ships in the world is built, the Libertad, which is out of Argentina. And she launched in 1963, which was a year of a lot of excitement. First, we have Alcatraz prison closing down in San Francisco Bay and transferring out the last of its prisoners. So in 1963, Julia Child's television show, The French Chef, debut. It will run for 10 seasons, and it turns her into a household name. Her personality, her humor, and most of all, her passion for food and wine made French cooking much less intimidating and much more relatable to her U.S. audience.
Good morning, everyone. I am Lieutenant Guzzi from Libertad tall ship, the Argentine Navy tall ship. It was built in 1963, so from these years, it was sailing different oceans, different seas. The Libertad holds the record of 17.7 knots. It was a faster record. The name of the ship means freedom, is libertad in Spanish. So it is a value that means a lot for both of our nations. With departure from Argentina, 11th April, almost 2 months sailing till I arrived to Baltimore. This is a training school on board. So we are training on midshipmen. Our midshipmen are the future of our Navy. They learn about navigation, about different maneuvers on board, but mainly cooperation, working together. Those comrades would be different partners on Navy the next 35 years at least. Our deck is the main place that the crew works on board. We have 3 different masts and 1 to the bow. We can see the main mast. The main mast, his length is of 57 meters. We are inside of the command bridge. Our job as an officer here is conduct this tall ship from one port to another port. Our main job too is the safety on board. So in order to avoid different crossings with another ship, another boats, we conduct this tall ship from here. We have the different instruments, nautical instruments. So we have the hand, the radar, different nautical charts, and we have the control of our engines here. This is the facility of our midshipmen could study and eat and socialize with other midshipmen and other students in order to prepare different tests, different exams on board. They take different classes here, the navigation classes, maneuver, and fighting with different fires on board. We have in front of ship a lady. Her name is Vicky. Vicky represents freedom guiding our tall ship on the sea. All of us are very exciting because it will be the 4th of July, and this tall ship arrived different times in New York. It will be awesome. This is special for us and especially for me. Sailing with all these different tall ships next to us, it's amazing. We have different cultures, we have different maneuvers, but at the end, all of us are sailors, so the sea join us.
You have to appreciate the words liberty and freedom. And I really enjoyed the shots down below. You know, it didn't look like hardship duty to me. Maybe 200 years ago, it wasn't so nice down below. But the Libertad looks like a beautiful vessel. And the leader that we listened to there was certainly passionate about it. Well, as we're learning here, there's a lot of history to these vessels and a lot of stories of why they were out there. And we had a good chance to catch up with Dr. Tara Ryder. Dr. Ryder is with Stony Brook University. She served in the U.S. Coast Guard, and she's been studying hard about the history of tall ships in New York. And I felt quite lucky that we had a chance to sit down and learn from her. So with that, we're going to have a little talk with Dr. Tara Ryder. Well, lucky us, we get to talk to Tara Ryder about history and New York Harbor, and she's an expert in this topic and proudly hails from University of New York, Stony Brook, a great part of the world to be out there, to say the least. But Tara, I have to start off with a story. So when I was a junior at New York Maritime, State University, New York Maritime College, circa 1971, we got a football team going. Now I was on a sailing team, so I went to watch the football game. And our first game ever from that college was against Stony Brook. And the New York Daily News did their football predictions in the Friday paper, Notre Dame, Michigan, et cetera, and they said Stony Brook 40, New York Maritime 0 was their prediction. And then they had a little inscription underneath that said, "Oh, Captain, my Captain, what should we do? It's 4th down and 20, and we're back on the 2. Well, the coach posted that on the locker room wall, and that got everybody inspired, and I think Maritime won 10-7. So anyway, sorry about that.
Sometimes we've got to take our losses, but Seawolves will always come back.
But you're at a great school and a lot going on, and a lot of work in the environment that goes on out there, too. So New York Harbor is a fascinating place. I mean, in the early days when the country was being formed, in the early 1800s and, through the early 1900s, the waterfront was not a tidy place. It was dirty and there was a lot going on and people didn't want to be there. It smelled badly. But eventually people started to realize, hey, this waterfront is valuable and we want to see the water. And when do you think the transition started to happen where the waterfront was a place not to be to become a place that people really sought it out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, traditionally, it's the poor who lived closest to the water because that was where you were more likely to have dirty water that led to wonderful, fabulous diseases like dysentery and cholera. So the poor lived in those areas, and you see that in the 19th century if you look at like the different immigrant groups like 5 Points when the Irish came in the middle to the end of the 19th century. But you start to, during this period of the 19th century, start to get a growing awareness of environmental issues. And the two big ones are air and water, cleanliness. And so as you get into the beginning of the 20th century and you get like the progressive movement, there is a growing idea of we need clean water. And this is where you'll see in like New York City, the roots of the sanitation department, the idea of how can we bring clean water, for drinking to everyone. Because if someone gets sick, it's going to spread throughout the city. But you don't really start to get the push in New York Harbor, I would say, until closer to the middle of the 20th century. And again, much of it is tied, like the understanding of we need to do this. But really, how do we do it? The funding to do things like this really is kind of coming out of that environmental movement of the 1960s, 1970s. And we'll start to see as you get to the end of the 20th century, that growing awareness. You get projects like the Billion Oyster Project, which is to help clean up, the water there. And that's coming out of that kind of turn of the 21st century. So the awareness was there, the idea of how do we do this? Because again, simply the sheer scope of use of these waterways and all of the different ways that our waterways were getting polluted, whether it was through sewage, through shipping, made it a really complicated question.
Well, the Oyster Project is extraordinary, what that has done. It sounds simple. Oh, let's put oysters and we'll grow them. And yet they clean up the water dramatically.
They can clean up to 50 gallons. Each oyster can clean up to 50 gallons a week.
Wow.
So putting in 1 billion oysters, and it is a phenomenal project. I am very proud. I've had so many students and colleagues who've been involved in this project. And it really is making a significant difference in cleaning up those waterways and thinking about what does that then bring in, the type of diversity that you're going to get in these areas. Again, just improves from an environmental viewpoint, but also ultimately there's an economic benefit that comes out. So, recognizing all of the variables that go into this makes it such an incredible project.
One of my favorite things to do, especially with grandkids, is do the Circle Line trip around Manhattan. On one hand, maybe it's a little bit hokey, but every time it's cool and you learn something new and it's great fun. And one of the things that you see as a sailor going around Manhattan is the currents are pretty swift, certainly on the East River side, but the Hudson too is really something. So I got to think those swift moving currents certainly must help clean the waters and help that. Is that correct?
It definitely plays into it, but it's also shifting a lot of the pollution. So pollution that's in one area does get shifted to new areas, and it is something to be aware of. But it is, it's one of the challenges from an environmental viewpoint, from a sailing viewpoint. I mean, the fact that it was called Hell's Gates goes all the way back to Adrian Block in the 1500s, who was like, I don't want to go back that way. Let me go discover what else is out there. And he figures out there's a long island. So again, it is a challenging area, but it does have a lot of potential of, what can be done with those currents and how it can, improve our waterways. Can we shift out pollutants?
I think there was a book that I picked up at a Barnes & Noble about 10 or 12 years ago called Mannahatta. It was about what Manhattan was like in the early days. So before the Dutch got here and the early settlers, there were certainly some indigenous peoples. We know that story. But describe what Manhattan was like and on the Jersey side and the Queens side. What was this area? What did it look like back then?
I mean, first of all, we have to recognize that Manhattan was smaller than what it is today. About a third of Manhattan is reclaimed land. That grew over time, because one of the challenges to Manhattan is you can only expand outwards so much. So as we start to see settlement in late 1700s into the 1800s, they do build up the southern portion of Manhattan. This is why there's actually old schooners have been found when they did some of the archaeological work after 9/11, and they found an old schooner down there, and that's where they basically sunk it to give something for the dirt to hold on to. So we do have to think about the fact that it's a smaller land. But it also had a lot more animal diversity. If we look at, the Long Island, the Jersey, Manhattan areas, we had things like wolves, we had bears, we had bobcats. So it was a very mixed environment when we think about it, of trees. The native populations, the Algonquins, the Lenape, Indians were all horticulturalists as well as hunters. So again, they were also not first and foremost, but definitely also using the waterways. So shellfishing was definitely part of their way of life. No matter how we look at it, this area has always historically, with the peoples living here, whether they were indigenous populations or the Europeans coming over, were living in a coastal zone. And they were making use of our waterways, from fishing to shell fisheries to whaling was going on in these areas, as well as using the land itself to grow crops like corn and, beans and what we think of as the Three Sisters.
Can you imagine somebody from the 1500s coming in a time machine and seeing Manhattan today?
It would be definitely a very different world from what they had seen in the 1500s. I mean, we have to recognize the lack of trees that we have today compared to, this would have been a much more wooded area at that time. Again, we use the wood, as Europeans came over, they, used the wood. Adrian Block, who I mentioned before, and who is seen as the kind of namer of Long Island, built what was probably the first European boat in this part of the world. So immediately those trees were seen as a boon to shipbuilding. Something that especially the English are going to focus quite heavily on, because they needed tall trees to make the masts for these tall ships. So the types of ships that we're seeing coming in.
Well, talking about schooners and boats being built, back in 1851, a guy named John Cox Stevens, now Stevens Institute of Technology over in Hoboken, and some of his friends built a boat, a schooner, at an invitation for a big fair that was taking place in London. And they didn't call the boat Hoboken or Manhattan, they called it America. And sailed it across the ocean and beat the British. I think there were 18 boats racing around the Isle of Wight, and America clobbered them. And that started a regatta that's still going on today, called the America's Cup. And but I think that moment kind of sent a message to the world that American naval architecture and navigational prowess and sailing skill was something to reckon with.
I mean, we definitely have to recognize by the middle of the 19th century, this is a period when whaling is definitely being done all over the world, the Atlantic, the Pacific, up into our northern Arctic waters. And the American whalers were at the forefront of this type of exploration. So those types of sailing vessels were definitely part of our history, our naval story. We also see, this is the rise in the period of the clipper ships, which would become, the fastest ships of that time period, bringing valuable cargo like pepper, as quickly as possible, as well as, passengers and things like mail. The idea was they clipped along at a good speed. And so we definitely see this period of the 19th century the growing rise of American maritime power. We'd had a dip, if we think about it, in the kind of a beginning of the 19th century as we had our growing pains, we could argue, as a new country. But by the middle of the 19th century, we are expanding economically, and that's going to help us politically, but ultimately it's naval power and maritime power is part of that story.
You know, it's extraordinary. I mean, so much of this, we today take all this for granted, but these people were groundbreaking and innovators, and there wasn't a manual on how to do this. And they were building vessels, as you point out, all around New York, the Yacht America being one. Of course, that was based on a pilot boat, the pilots going out. And you wanted to have a fast pilot boat because you wanted to be the first to get to the ship. So you got the commission before anybody else. So they were actually racing back at that time. I mean, it'd be good to go back in a time machine and look at it. And I think we'd all probably be horrified at what we saw and be grateful where we are today. The Hudson River is fascinating to me, too. You know, you imagine you've come across the ocean, you're kind of coming up this harbor, no bridges or anything. And the river, the Hudson River, just keeps going and going and going. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing. And, of course, that helped commerce and certainly helped New York and New Jersey as well with shipping and commerce.
It definitely opens up. I mean, we have to recognize that with the opening of the Erie Canal by 1825, that linked New York City right across the northern part of the United States. It pretty much put the city as the economic hub of the United States because we had that connection with Europe and with the rest of the Atlantic world, but now we could also connect through the Great Lakes with all of that growing expansion in the 19th century of moving westward. And the Hudson River is definitely, part of that story of how do we grow not only as a city, as a state, but ultimately as a country as well.
Well, one of the most iconic figures in New York with the pilots and air pilots and sailors always talk about the lady. And of course, I'm talking about the Statue of Liberty, which is such a thing. And it's fascinating. The French sent that over in ships. I think it was something like 200 crates with it all. And it got here. We didn't have the money to build it. So they had to wait to get enough money to build the base before they could put this thing on top. But that Statue of Liberty is such an iconic thing. And anytime you're out in the harbor and see that, and it must have meant a lot to people that ended up in Ellis Island and coming in and seeing the Statue of Liberty.
It's something to keep in mind. It welcomed all of these immigrants who were arriving, in the latter part of the 19th century, right into today. But it was also one of the things we have to remember, the last thing that so many sailors saw when they were leaving on these, transatlantic and, transglobal journeys. But it was also then the first, one of the, first things where you say, I'm home. You would see Montauk Lighthouse was one of those symbols, but Our Lady was definitely another one as they would come in. And it meant you had safely arrived back. You had successfully arrived back. And again, recognizing that, sailing historically was a dangerous job, that you have to imagine the sheer joy of seeing that.
I have a story, if you would like to hear it. It involves the Statue of Liberty. It's an international story, and it taught a little bit of local knowledge. So I went to college in New York City, up in the Bronx. My wife's from Brooklyn, and I grew up over in a place called New Jersey. And in 1986, there was a regatta called the Liberty Cup. And this was during the era where we were celebrating the Roeblings with Brooklyn Bridge. And it was a tennis ladder elimination with 8 countries, and I was representing the U.S. And, you have USA on your sail. You want to perform well. Well, we eliminated down, and we were up against some country called Australia. And the crew on the Australian boat were the very crew, the same guys that had taken the America's Cup away from the New York Yacht Club a few years earlier. Now I'm racing them in the final of this regatta. And the course, we started right off the ferry dock at Liberty Island and went south toward the Verrazano Bridge. And then we would work our way with the spinnakers up, going with the wind to a buoy kind of off the battery. So it was up, down, and back up to the finish line. And we were behind them going downwind. And the current was ebbing out of New York. It was strong, maybe 3 knots, 3 nautical miles an hour. So it's going slow, and we're about 4 boat lengths behind. And I'm scratching my head. How are we going to pass these guys? This is hard. And I thought, I wonder if the current's less behind Liberty Island and Ellis Island. So I sent my crew below to look at the chart, and they said, oh, it's 5 feet deep back there at low tide. Well, it's middle tide now, and we only draw 5 feet. Let's go. So we sailed away from the Australians, went behind Liberty Island, went behind Ellis Island. There was no current. In fact, there was a counter current going the other way. And by the time we got to the mark off the battery, we were way ahead of the Australians and won the race. They were really upset. Fast forward 1 year. A year later, we're in the final again. Australians are in the final again. There we are battling the ebb current going out of the Hudson River, New York Harbor. The Australians are behind us this time, but only about 2 boat lengths. And they jibed away from us to pull the same trick on us that we'd pull up on them a year earlier. But the sad part about the story is we didn't have our onboard cameras and microphones aboard their boat to see the look on their faces and what they had to say when they got behind Liberty Island to find out that that winter a bridge had been built from Ellis Island over to New Jersey. By the time they came back around, we won that race too. So anyway, that's my little fun story.
I like that story. Oh, always important to check those charts to see what might have changed.
Well, local knowledge made it. When they jived away, I thought, oh my God, they don't know there's a bridge, which is about 8 feet high, that bridge from Ellis Island over to New Jersey. It was a good thing to put. But anyway, we won that race too. So that was my fun story, which was right up there with the Knicks winning this year, which was just great fun for everybody. I watched every moment of every game. So
I was about to say a lot of New York pride. I will admit I watched part of the game, and I'm not even a native New Yorker. So
well, they weren't expected to do well, and they came from behind, and everybody likes an underdog, and you could tell they were playing their heart out. Who's not going to respect that? So anyway, it was very cool.
Yeah, it was definitely exciting for everyone.
I have a question for you. I'm going to shift gears here. This is a really hard one. So I was around, and I'm guessing you were too, back in 1976. The last time we celebrated the 200th anniversary. I don't know, it's scarier that we're celebrating the 250th. There's been 50 years gone by since the 200th. But here's my question. What's New York Harbor and New York going to look like 50 years from now, or even 100 years from now?
I think that's a really interesting question, and one that I definitely don't have any magic 8-ball for to be able to guess why, what it will look like. I am hoping that it will be cleaner, that path that we've seen with projects like the Billion Oyster Project will continue. I'd like to see it still having that same kind of usage, still, where we celebrate what it stands for with, people arriving and seeing the Statue of Liberty. I do think that we will continue to be an economic hub, so we're still going to have to think about, the larger, ships coming in, thinking about that element of cargo. I mean, how many of us, shop online and somewhere those products have to make it to the U.S. But it is something exciting. I do think it is going to continue to be a hub, just as we saw it as a hub in the 1600s and the 1700s, and we saw it grow in usage by the time you get to the 1800s into the modern 20th century. I think it's simply going to continue to grow. The question of, what vessels will be coming in, our vessels have gotten larger over the years. That may shape some of the design and how it's used, but I do think that it will continue to be a center point and an attraction. So both use, but also that moment of pride, of looking and going, this is the heart of, coming into New York, and thinking about what it represents as opportunity, as hope, and ultimately, how it's connected deeply to our history as New Yorkers, as Americans, as well as its global role.
So when I think of the tall ships and other vessels coming in New York Harbor on July 4th, there'll be a festive day, probably a little bit warm out, but a festive day. I think of spectators in two ways. Certainly people on Governor's Island and on both shorelines and up in buildings. There'll be a lot of people watching. At the same time, there's going to be a lot of people, cadets, midshipmen, officers on these tall ships, the Class A's and the smaller vessels coming in New York. And they're looking at everybody else. And I'm guessing that many of them probably never been to New York before. And on vessels, as you know, when you're out at sea, you're by yourself. It's rare you see another vessel. And now all this attention. So it's going to have an impact on these people. And I hope they have good feelings about being in New York from being here. And the camaraderie between the crews of the boats as they get to know each other is pretty special as we bring everybody together.
Yeah, I do agree because, there are going to be, thousands and thousands of tourists coming to see these vessels, but these vessels themselves, we could argue, are tourists as well. They're coming from all over the world. We have them coming from, Italy and Germany and Europe, but we have them coming from India and Chile. As you said, both the Type A and the smaller vessels. And for many of them, this will be their first experience for the crews, especially coming. And thinking about the kind of exchange of just of ideas and thoughts and experiences and just the simple excitement of all of this is really something I'm quite excited about.
So I've sailed on several of these ships and the smaller vessels, the Lynx, Pride of Baltimore, vessels like that. And I've done a transatlantic on a Dutch boat called the Stad Amsterdam, obviously named after the city of Amsterdam, like we were at one point, the Dutch. And one of the things that astounded me doing these boats is, A, they're faster than you think. We were averaging about 15 nautical miles an hour, so to push a 400-foot vessel at 15 knots is pretty good under wind alone. But how much work it is hauling all those lines, and they're complicated. So you have to learn all the different sails. They all have a name: the royals, the gallants, the skysails, the mainsails, staysail. I mean, everything's got a name, and everybody knows which rope to pull, and there's hundreds of ropes all over the place, and you got to learn that. And what it surprised me was how much good teamwork and leadership there are on these vessels to make it all work and have it sail efficiently and do it safely. You are in the ocean. Going across the ocean, the only thing better than 30 miles an hour is 40 miles an hour on one of these tall ships, because they can take it and they just go a little bit faster, which I'm sure was important to the owners in commerce to have boats like that.
It is something to keep in mind. I have to give a shout out to the Harvey Gamage, which is one of the smaller vessels, having worked on her.
That's a good one. I've been on it.
It is. And one of the things I definitely saw was the camaraderie that was on board with, the crew, and they are an ocean classroom setting. So the students who come on board for those lengths of time, and, over the years, I've seen people's friendships that started on board the Gamage that have continued, decades after sailing on board. And you are working side by side, but it's not just working. You're living side by side. You're entertaining each other, in a very small world. And in many ways, that really highlights the experiences that sailors had historically. They were at sea in this world that basically is limited by, the bowsprit of the boat and the stern of the boat. And these are the people you're going to bond with, because again, you are battling Mother Nature. Whether it's simply over survival or how, can you get that extra knot or two, if you put a little bit more sail out, of thinking about that. And you really create, bonds with people that you may not have expected to. And that's something we do see coming out of kind of maritime history, is the different support systems, that rolled out of the forecastle, as they said, of, friendships that occurred on these ships. And you had crews that typically would come from all over the world. So you had, kind of knowledge that was being exchanged. But it is a world that you come in as a green hand knowing nothing and having to very quickly learn because you want to survive.
You know, there was a retired ship captain that I knew when I was young. When I say young, I was probably in my early 20s. He was 70, and at the time I thought he was kind of old. Today I don't think he's so old at all. But he would say to the crews on his vessels, all sailing vessels, if everybody does just a little bit more than they're expected of their job, we're going to be in great shape. And that's resonated with me all these years later. You know, everybody does their job and a little more, and the whole thing runs like clockwork. That's where you get that sense of teamwork. And as you point out, people will see each other 30 years later and, oh, we were on that ship together, you know, and you're bonded from that experience of the ocean crossing that you might have done. I think some of these cadets or midshipmen might not understand that now, but they will as time goes by.
And they're getting an experience when you're on these boats of being so close to nature in a way that you may not get on, you know, a Coast Guard cutter or larger naval vessels. You feel the currents in a way that is different, and you are not only bonding with your crewmates, but you're really having a experience with nature that you do not get in other settings when you're on these types of sailing vessels.
I like to say, I talk to people and at groups, what's it like to be out there? I said, well, the sky over your head, the sails just above your head, with your hands on the wheel, your feet on the deck, you can feel the boat underneath you, and the water moving around underneath that. And all kind of exist as one, and it's just one fluid motion, and you get into it, and people do get seasick, but it goes away quickly. Within a day or so, that's no longer a problem. I will say that every great sailor I've been with, America's Cup, transatlantic, Olympic medalist, everybody's had their moment of seasickness. So if anybody fears it, but the beauty thing is our body adapts fairly quickly, and a day or so later, you're okay. Of course, then when you get off the vessel, you're still rocking around for a few hours.
You do have a distinctive walk.
Yeah, you do. You're kind of weaving back and forth, oh, what's this all about? But that goes away too, and then you have a good experience. Well, where are you going to be on July 4th?
Actually, I'm hoping my husband and I are going to be in the city. We're going to be taking a look at all of these lovely tall ships coming in. As I said, I have, want to go see the Harvey Gamage. And again, many of these are vessels that I've either visited or sailed on. And so I'm looking forward to seeing them come in. This is always when the tall ships arrive. I'm always one of the people who are like, are you available? Let's go down.
All right, Tara, I love the enthusiasm and all your knowledge. You must have done a lot of study to understand New York as well as you do. So thank you very much. And
thank you.
Hope to see you around the waterfront over the 4th of July weekend. Happy 250th.
Yes, and happy 4th of July to you. I hope you enjoy this fabulous experience that we're going to have in New York.
That's a fascinating interview with Tara Ryder. So, it's so much fun to be with somebody that has such in-depth knowledge and does it in an enthusiastic way. Really quite special. I actually wish I could have another hour with her. It was so good. All right, well, let's go on back to Ayo down on the dock at the Intrepid Pier, and I think she's got 3 special people with her. So, Ayo, let's head to you, and who do you have to introduce to us today?
Yeah, they're not only special, they're gorgeous. They're not even sweating in this hot weather. They are looking like they're from straight out of the 1940s. This is America's Sweethearts. I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Carly. I'm Tracy. I'm Kristen.
And tell me, Sweethearts, besides I'm not like anyone else here today. So we are a singing group. We've been together for about 10 years, and we do a lot of events like this, but we also travel the country singing at different performing arts centers around the country. Kristen was just in North Carolina. We had another group in Reno today. So we're just traveling sisterhood of singers. How many sisterhoods?
We always sing in a trio, but there's about 12 of us total, so we can make up different trios if someone else is busy doing something else.
And so what are you going to be singing for us today?
Ooh, Angela Sisters Good Boy of Company B.
I remember that was a movie as well, right? The plot of the movie real quick.
We don't know.
I can remember. Yeah. But definitely one of the Andrews Sisters' most famous, I would say the most famous of the era, but it sort of gave them the nickname America's Sweethearts because they used to go sing for the USO. So that's where we got our name too. I love that. All right, Gary, are you ready? Because we're in for a treat right now. I'm going to step out and let America's Sweetheart.
I can't wait. It sounds great.
He was a famous trumpet man from out Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was a top man at his craft. But then his number came up and he was gone in the draft. He's in the army now, a blowing reveille. He's a boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B. He puts the boys to sleep and boogie every night and wakes them up the same way in the early bright. They clap their hands and stamp their feet because they know how he plays. He really breaks it up when he puts boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company B. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dooba-dooba. The Company Johnson, he plays reveille. He's the boogie-woogie bugle boy of Company.
Well, that was pretty special. Reminded me of my parents' era's music, the World War II generation, the greatest generation, as Tom Brokaw said. And they were great singers. And I also kind of liked the headgear they had on, reminiscent of the World War II era. Very special. Well, we'll get back to Ayo here in a little bit. And now we'd like to move on to another one of the vessels that was here in New York Harbor celebrating the 250th, Esmeralda. Esmeralda is a large vessel, 371 feet, and she's from Chile and came with a crew of 300 sailors aboard the boat. She was originally built in 1946 in Cadiz, Spain, but she's been part of the Chilean Navy for a long time, and we've got a special report from the Esmeralda.
Our next tall ship is the Esmeralda from Chile. She, like the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Eagle, first launched in 1946. And as I had said, that was the years following World War II. So not only do we have political events happening, but we have something that probably resonates with many New Yorkers today. The first NBA game was played between the New York Knickerbockers, now known as the Knicks, and the Toronto Huskies. And the Knicks did win that game 68-66. The same year as the Knickerbockers won this first NBA game, we have the first Cannes Film Festival also being hosted. 1946 was also a fun year when we realized that Elvis Presley got his first guitar. Like many boys at that time, he actually wanted either a bicycle or a rifle. But he got his guitar and set him on his way for the legend he would become.
Here comes Chile's magnificent Esmeralda, known affectionately as the White Lady. With her gleaming white hull and 4 towering masts, she's one of the most elegant ships in the parade of sail. For generations, she's trained young Chilean naval officers, and this weekend she joins the world in celebrating America's 250th birthday. Stretching 380 feet, Esmeralda is one of the longest ships in the fleet. She carries 31,000 square feet of sail, a crew of 200 sailors, and more than 100 cadets, making her one of the true giants of Sailforth 250. Here's something you may not know. Esmeralda has served as Chile's floating ambassador for more than 70 years, visiting ports on nearly every continent.
Captain Edward Gibbons, commanding officer of Esmeralda from Chile. And yes, we're very excited, we're very proud to be able to participate in the celebrations for the 250th anniversary of the United States here in New York. A lot of energy right now. Everyone's very excited to be here. We've been prepping for this, training, and as I said, this is a highlight of our training cruise, and we're all really excited to be able to participate in this historic moment. Joining the Navy in your country is the best way to serve your nation, and you get to do cool stuff like this, participate in nice parades of sail and visit the world aboard the training ship. Just being out there, quiet ocean, and feeling the waves hitting the hull. It's hard to describe. It's not easy to describe, but it's that freedom you have of just being out in the water and understanding how the wind is affecting you, and then just being there with the sea.
Well, from going from one of the biggest ships in New York Harbor on July 4th, we'll go to one of the smaller ones at 212 feet, the Ark Gloria from Colombia. This vessel was built back in 1968, kind of a tumultuous time here in this country. Vietnam War was going on. We had some very sad assassinations, Dr. Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy. But at the time, the country of Colombia thought, we too need to be in sail training. They saw these other ships around the world and decided to build their own. So we're going to take a little look at the Ark Gloria.
In 1968, the Gloria, which is homeported in Cartagena, Colombia, was built. Now, in that year, the U.S. was still involved in the Vietnam War, with President Lyndon B. Johnson being advised to seek peace. We also sadly have the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as well as Robert F. Kennedy happening that year. We also have new pushes within the world of technology. The first 911 call was placed in the U.S. Now, AT&T helped to set this number. They thought that 911 would be easy to remember, and just as importantly, had not been used for an area code yet. We have exciting movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Planet of the Apes, as well as Rosemary's Baby being released during this time. But one of the most exciting things for the public was the launching of both the Apollo 7 and Apollo 8 missions. The Apollo 7 conducted a 11-day orbit of Earth, during which the crew transmitted the first live television broadcasts from orbit. Apollo 8, which followed later in the year, was the first manned mission to the moon that took place for over 6 days. And throughout this time, there were television images that were sent back home, and spectacular photos of Earth and the moon were taken. It is also the first time that astronauts saw the far side of the moon.
I am a midshipman Juan Martín Rosero. I am from a crew member of the RSC Gloria. The RSC Gloria is the official flagship of the Colombian Navy, acting as a flooring embassy for our country. I am feeling happy because I have the opportunity to celebrate the 250 years of the Army and have the opportunity to share the Colombian Navy, with the other Navy of the world. The Colombian ship has commissioned in Spain in 1968 and built in Spain in Bilbao. Built in Spain and commissioned in the 1968. The RSC Gloria was created to train the future Colombian naval officers. In her lifetime, and she has sailed hundreds of thousands of nautical miles, crossing the Ecuador multiple times, and carried Colombian messages of peace around the globe. It's important because it's the only university in the Colombia, and have the opportunity to travel with the different countries about the Navy and the people, and according to feeling, and with you share the different times, do different activity. For example, in Colombia can be situated Caño Cristales, it's the only river in the world that they have a 7 colors at the same time. Characteristic because on the floor and have different plants, to characterize the color. The moment to building, the wife of the person that the building in Gloria in Bilbao, Spain, named Gloria, So according to that can be comparing and maybe the ship a Gloria. This is the representation picture, but they at the moment steady with the middle in the ocean, and the form of navigation, guild for the different stars, and today have more modern because have the computer charts, to represent instruction with the different midshipmen to one plane online and in the ocean. Where we now I am staying in this moment in the wheelhouse, in the form, but they have a different crew member, have a different department, So pay attention what is the problem to happen in this moment for the navigation and when I stand in the night or the day. And this is a wheel by the form by the driving the ship, Have a pull in different part of the ship, but different work, to solve the more safe to arrive before and after to different part of the country. For the example, this is the control of the motor and the stand to the right, the boat side, to pay attention of the other boat can be represent a problem with the navigation. One thing outstanding by the Colombian half is the Gloria Navy floating embassy, floating Colombia.
After seeing that report on Gloria, I kind of want to go out sailing on the vessel. It looks like great fun, and I love talking to the officer there. When I was a sailing coach many years ago at the U.S. Naval Academy, there was a young man who was a high school student that caught my attention. He was sailing out of the Pequot Yacht Club in Southport, Connecticut, and he looked to me like a far better than average sailor and the kind of kid that really should be coming to the Naval Academy. And I remember writing him a letter, and lucky me, he came. So I got to coach this young man for 1 year. He graduated from the Naval Academy. He became an All-American sailor while he was on the sailing team and went off and had a distinguished career in the United States Navy. I hadn't heard from him for quite a long time, but about 5 years ago, he and I got to sail together in a Masters regatta out in San Diego, and he had just retired as a 3-star admiral from the United States Navy after quite a distinguished career. His name is Dixon Smith. And I got a chance to sit down with Dixon and talk about the value of sail training. And interestingly, after he retired, living in San Diego, after his career, he ended up moving back to Annapolis, my hometown, and he's now got the title of Director of Competitive Sailing at the United States Naval Academy. So this is a man that's on top of the game. Let's meet Admiral Dixon Smith. Well, welcome to our continuing coverage of the Sail 254th here in New York Harbor. And we're joined by retired Vice Admiral Dixon Smith, who currently is living in Annapolis and is the Director of Naval Academy Competitive Sailing. And I love having that word competitive in there, Dixon. And thank you very much for joining us. So the Naval Academy has sent 3 of their 44-foot racing training vessels up to New York for the harbor. What things will they be doing over the next few days?
So, Gary, they just pulled in to New York Harbor this morning. They got to sail past Statue of Liberty and the Battery, and now they're heading up the East River. They're going to go over to Kings Point and stay at Kings Point until it's time to come over Dark 30 on the 4th to join the parade up the river to GW and back down.
You know, back in 1976, the Naval Academy had 4 of the Luder's 44s at that time. And they had the wind just right. They could set spinnakers, did simultaneous jibes, and it stole the show. It was really something special. Do you have anything like that planned for this time around, 2026?
So the boats we have, they're part of what's called our Command Seamanship Training Squadron, so CSTS Squadron. So these are midshipmen, predominantly our rising sophomores or what we call youngsters. And so they don't have any sailing experience. So they've had a week of ground school and local ops here in San Diego before they headed up. They did a quick stop in Baltimore. They're now up in New York. After the 4th of July weekend festivities are over, they're going to head up to Boston and do the 250 up there before they come home. Of course, the winds have got to be right going up the river. But we are sending up some offshore team sailors to join them in case the winds are right, that we can also fly the spinnakers. Each one of the 3 boats is going to be aligned with one of the tall ships and escorting them up the river at 6 knots.
Of course, the spinnakers have the navy blue and gold proudly flying on the cloth, which will make them look really good. So I hope you get the spinnakers flying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Dixon, you've had quite a career. Grew up in Southern Connecticut, got a commission to the Naval Academy, got your 4 years in, and then had quite a distinguished career in the Navy. And while you were at the Academy, you were on the sailing team, I think all 8 semesters with the team. How did your sail training help you with your career once you got into the fleet?
One of the beauties of sailing, whether it's dinghies and also offshore and a lot more offshore in some ways, is decision making that you've got to do, risk management, risk assessment, leading a group of folks in adverse conditions. You know, we've got 36 varsity sports here at the Academy, and what I like to remind both the superintendent, who basically is the president of our the Academy here, and the athletic director is 34 or 35 of the 36 sports. If something goes wrong, you have an injury or breakdown, you can call it timeout. When you're out in the ocean and you have an injury, someone, has something happen to their hand on a winch or whatever the case may be, or something breaks, you can't call a timeout. You got to fix it, and you got to keep on going with what you got. Having that kind of experience here at the Academy, I was privileged to have the old Scaramouche and Morningstar, the Freres 48, my senior year, and I was able to take her offshore and be able to put together a team of midshipmen and do the Annapolis to Newport, do the Marblehead to Halifax race, being offshore and things go wrong, happen to figure out on the spot how to correct it and persevere, really helped in my career when those same kind of situations presented themselves on the ship I might have been assigned to at the time.
One of the proud graduates in Naval Academy, now past, Buzz Aldrin, came and spoke at the Academy about 15 years ago, and I was there that afternoon when astronaut Aldrin came, and he really spoke about the value of being on the offshore sailing team and how that helped him with Apollo 13 and his missions in space. And it was quite inspiring that sail training made a difference in a real time of need.
Well, the same thing. The things going wrong in space, you've got to react and you've got to make decisions with the resources you have. Yes, you can call back and ask for help, but you've got to use the tools and the resources and the people to effect the repairs or correct the casualty and make the decisions. You can't stop go to the store or bring out a new part to fix what's going on in that real-time situation.
So a word that I like to use, and see if you endorse it, when you're at sea, you've got to be resourceful.
Yes, you've
things
got to
happen,
be resourceful.
and you might not know what's coming, but resourceful is an important word.
I agree. It's resourceful. You've got to have ingenuity. You've got to have decision making. You've got to think on the spot and make decisions real time.
So I think the Coast Guard has a pretty good presence here in New York Harbor, and the Navy and the Coast Guard have very different missions, but they both have academies, and you get to know each other, and you compete on the water, obviously. And how does the Navy and Coast Guard interface with each other?
So we see each other in the sailing perspective. We see each other at the regattas, whether it's intercollegiate dinghy sailing or whether it's offshore. For example, Newport Bermuda race just completed here last week. Coast Guard had a boat in it, and actually Coast Guard and our two Navy boats. We have a Curve 50 that sailed, one of our donated boats, and one of the Navy 44s, the government assets. They were together on the team of 3 boats racing Newport Bermuda and got scored together. There's a close relationship. We come from the same brotherhood, sisterhood, and service to the country. And so those form bonds over those 4 years, and they will continue after they graduate.
I think one of the 44s with midshipmen on it did pretty well in the Newport Bermuda race.
It did very well. Invincible, she finished 3rd in St. David's Lighthouse, Division 2, only bested by Dorade and Carina, historic boats, and that both have won the race before. Overall, she finished 10th out of 86 in the St. David's Lighthouse division, which of course is the Corinthians division. We also, in the Annapolis to Bermuda race this year, we had another Navy 44 that actually won that race, and ORC corrected.
Pretty impressive stuff, a real feather in the cap of the midshipmen. And they're in charge, right? They're making all the decisions. You do have an officer on the boat, but he's just as an advisor and make sure everything's running smoothly. But he's not making the decisions. They let the mids do it. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so the skipper of the boat, which is a midshipman, in this case, it's a rising senior, they have to go through a qualification process and make sure that they understand the boat, whether it's the electrical systems, the engineering systems, the sail plan, damage control. So again, if adversity strikes or in the ocean, they know how to respond. And so they earn that qualification. And generally speaking, there are 8 midshipmen on the boat, and probably 2 or 3 have that qualification and know what they're doing. And then there was probably 3 to 4 rising sophomores that don't have a whole lot of experience. But yes, those senior midshipmen are in charge of the boat and have the qualifications and experience that we trust them. And so the safety officers, the coaches are just there in case something happens in extremis where they need help.
So I was at a dinner a couple months ago in Annapolis that celebrated women being at the academy. It's been 50 years, which astounds me that 50 years have gone by because I was around during that time. And there was a couple tables with women that were sailing team. What percentage of the female midshipmen are on the sailing team and actively participate in the varsity team?
So I would tell you on the dinghy team, we have 35 on the team this past year, and 17 of those women were women. On the offshore team, I would say it's about 25% of the team. We carry between 70 and 80 people on the offshore team, and it's about 25%, which is the same demographic for the academy at large.
And one of the interesting things to me on the offshore sailing team is quite a few of the midshipmen are new to sailing when they came to Annapolis. They're from Nebraska or Iowa and haven't really been on the water before, and yet they go out for sailing.
No, absolutely. We actually just had our sports information period for the new class of freshmen or plebes. They showed up at I-Day or an indoctrination day last week. And for the offshore team, we had about probably 60 that showed up that were interested. We'll take about 30 when we're done with plebe summer and tryouts. But over 50% of them have no sailing experience when I asked who did and who did not have the experience. So yes, I mean, it's amazing what we'll do is, I mean, we've got 7 boats that are racing offshore this summer. And of the 7, probably 3 of them had no sailing experience before they got here. And now they're in charge of a boat.
That is very cool. So in the sport of sailing, when you're doing offshore racing or the command and seamanship training that you described earlier, you're often out at sea or in bays by yourself. You know, there's no spectators. It's not like Army Navy football gets a lot of spectators, a lot of television viewers. But here in New York Harbor, there's a big crowd. There's hundreds, thousands of boats and people on the shoreline, both on the Jersey and New York side and Governor's Island. What does it mean to midshipmen when they recognize that people are cheering for them and they become the showcase?
It's pretty cool for them because they don't, to your point, they don't realize or understand the folks that are out there. They actually are cheering on their Navy. I mean, that's part of not just in sailing, but the whole academy itself is they're larger than something, than themselves. It isn't just them. They're representing the Naval Academy, representing, the Navy. And in this case, this week, they're representing the United States, along the coastline of Manhattan. And it's a big deal for them. And they're going to have grins ear to ear, all Saturday long.
You know, one of the impressive things about the 250th in New York is these tall ships, the Class A's, from all over the world, Europe, South America, that are celebrating with us. And did you find in the Navy that you interface with some of these other countries and their navies? You know, I mean, I got to think there's a good spirit there when these other countries are sending their vessels to our country to celebrate our birthday.
Absolutely. We, our relationship with other countries, across all the services, but specifically the Navy, because of the way we deploy and move around the world, we have relationships, and we'll meet officers and sailors from other countries early on in our career, and those relationships will continue throughout. You know, case in point, we had the boats were in Baltimore along with the Class A's this past weekend, and they engaged together, and they're developing relationships as midshipmen with midshipmen from the other academies from other countries. Those relationships, and now they're going to see him again in New York, and they're going to see him again in Boston. And the relationship that they form over these next 3 weeks are going to continue for the rest of their careers and in lives, some cases.
So that helps get the world be a little safer place, I would think.
Absolutely. When something goes down or something goes wrong, if you have that relationship that's 20, 30 years old, and now you're a senior officer in the Navy, you can pick up the phone and have a conversation with your counterpart because you've already built that trust over those years.
You know, going back to the time that mids spend on the 44s and you send them on the ocean and they're in charge of their destiny there, I'm sure mistakes are made along the way. Things unexpected happen. There's weather events, there's equipment events, there might be seasickness goes on there. Are mistakes easily forgiven?
They are forgiven. I mean, obviously, if a mistake is made, we want to understand why it happened and do a debrief on it. And what are the proper actions should have been taken, take the corrective actions that need to be taken so it doesn't happen again. But I mean, we all know the best way you learn is trial and error and making mistakes. And so we need to have forgiveness, but also hold a high standard and expectation so it doesn't happen again.
You know, when I did the America's Cup with Ted Turner, I found that he was incredibly tolerant when somebody made a mistake. One time. You did not want to make a mistake a second time, but that first time, okay, let's understand what happened so it doesn't happen again. And I'll tell you, people made sure they didn't make a mistake a second time. So it was a good philosophy. It sounds like the same thing that goes on with the midshipmen.
Absolutely. I mean, we had a 44 have a soft grounding here earlier during spring practice. It shouldn't have happened, but okay, let's go figure out why it happened and put corrective actions in place so that mistake doesn't happen again.
Well, I've been on boats that have found North America myself a few times. It definitely happens. An unmarked shoal, not paying attention. Hopefully you run aground in some sandy bottom, not some rocky bottom up in Maine. That's it get a little more crazy when the bottom's not forgiving like that.
I have run aground in plenty of sailboats. I have to say, I've luckily, and it would be bad, I've not run aground in my ship.
So, Dixon, can you give me a couple highlights of some of the commands that you've had over the years?
Sure. So I had command of USS the Sullivans, DD-68, an Arleigh Burke destroyer out of Mayport, Florida. And of course, she is named after the 5 Sullivan brothers that went down on USS Juneau and Battle of Iron Bottom Sound. Historic ship. It was a privilege to have command of that. Many years ago, we deployed her to the Persian Gulf and had a very busy deployment over there. And then, I had grown up in cruisers and destroyers and culminated with that command when I was a commander. And then when I went back to the fleet after my tour here at the Academy in what we call Major Command, they sent me to Command Naval Base San Diego. And so I kind of moved over to the installation business, if you will, and I was responsible eventually for all 71 bases of the Navy has around the world. When I was in Hawaii, I was fortunate enough to have responsibility for the 10 ships that are signed out in Hawaii. So I've had a diverse career, but I think I've been blessed, fortunate to have command 7 or 8 times. So very, very lucky. And yes, I would do it all over again, to include being a plebe.
Well, I got to think with all that experience, it certainly helped for you when you're interfacing with the midshipmen today. You've been there and you can talk about it and inspire them and give them some guidance about their future careers.
I do. I to be able to come back here and be the director of competitive sailing is a blessing and an honor to be able to give back to both the sport and the institution that has given Kiki and I the life we've had, and mentorship and sitting down and talking with midshipmen about decision making, why are you doing what you're doing, mistakes that I made in the fleet, is a huge part of being here. And what makes this job so rewarding is interacting with those young men and women every single day.
I was at a meeting at the Naval Academy earlier this year when the superintendent came and spoke about the sailing team and his vision, and we all sat on our chairs leaning forward. And he said, look, I'm 100% for a sailing program. And if you need resources, you can come to me and let me help you out. If you have a recruit that needs a phone call, I'm happy to make a call. And, everybody's sitting up, oh, this is really good. And then he said, but I like winning. Winning is important. And you're in charge of competitive sailing. So how's it looking for the next couple seasons here, now that we know the superintendent's winning and you're in charge of competitive sailing?
Yeah. Superintendent was, if you're happy with second, don't bother coming to talk to me. Not good. We're good. We're so on the dinghy team side, we've got some great coaches here with Ian Burnham and KJ and Dylan. I think where we need to really focus on is the recruiting and who we're bringing in, increase the number of blue chips we're getting here, and we're working on that effort. So I'm optimistic of where we're heading over the next couple of years. Of course, there's 7 disciplines that we compete for national titles within the dinghy team. And so we've got to reinvigorate that across all 7. On the offshore side, we've been working hard to identify what right now we're sailing this summer, for example, 2 donated boats and 5 Naval Academy or Navy 44s. I want to change that mix and get to more donated boats, because now they're in more competitive fleets when they're up in New England racing or doing the offshore racing, vice with the 44. And so we're working closely with the Naval Academy Sailing Foundation, which is an awesome organization that goes out and finds folks that would like to donate their boats and charters them to the Academy at no cost. And so we're working hard on that to identify potential donors. And again, a lot of folks think that because we're the Naval Academy, Department of Navy, that we're funded by the taxpayer. That is not true at all. 98% of the Naval Academy Athletic Association is through revenue resources other than the government. Sailing, I rely heavily on donors and folks that are gracious enough to give to the program. So as we work the side of donated boats, I want to get to a mix where I'm all donated boats for the offshore team that also allows to give back the Navy 44s to the CSTS or the Command Seamanship Training Squadron, so we can get more midshipmen from the brigade out on the water and experiencing life at sea and the decision-making process that has to come with that.
So let me wind up here with one big question here. I'm sure we have some young viewers, middle school, high schoolers, that are considering their college and where they're going to go, and more importantly, what career they're going to go on. And the Naval Academy seems to me, if you like the sport of sailing, it's a great place to go. You have some interest in the sea. What do you say to prospective midshipmen and why they should try to get an appointment to the academy?
It's an amazing education. It's about something larger than yourself. If you want to get a first-class education, if you want to serve your country, give back, help make a difference, if you want to lead people, this is the place to come. It's going to push you. It's going to challenge you. Let's acknowledge it is not the same as going to a state university or a college somewhere, but it's a crucible. And if you want to challenge yourself and you want to push yourself and be better on the backside, this is the place to come. As I said earlier, I'll be honest. I came to the Naval Academy to sail. In retrospect, I am so glad I went through this because I'm a better person, a better husband, and a better man for having gone to the Naval Academy.
So I'm going to wind up with 4 great words that I'm going to try and get you to smile. You ready?
All right, go.
Go Navy, beat Army.
And everyone else.
Admiral, thank you very much.
Right.
Yeah, there
thank
you go.
Gary.
Exactly. Thank you very much for the time, and I hope to see you around the harbor here.
Hey, it's great to see you, and thank you so much.
You get the feeling that the competitive sailing program at the Naval Academy is in good hands with Admiral Dixon Smith there. He's going to be with us tomorrow live in the studio, so tune in. I got some more questions for him to talk about, and you can see that he's a very passionate man about the Naval Academy and the value of competitive sailing. And the midshipmen did very well. I think they got second place in their class in the recently completed Newport to Bermuda race. So we'll hear more from Dixon Smith tomorrow. Well, with that, let's go back to Ayo, who's still on the dock there at the Intrepid, and she has a guest that we're going to meet. Ayo, back to you, my friend.
Hey, Gary, I have found an incredible sailor who's going to spend a few minutes talking to us about his career in the Navy. We are with Petty Officer Amano. Thank you for so much for coming and talking with us. What does it mean to be a part of the 250th celebration of the America?
Thank you for having me here. I'm really grateful, and thank you for my chain of command for having me here. It's lovable to see people, talk to them about the U.S. Navy, and thank you.
You're very welcome. So obviously you have a little bit of an accent. Where are you originally from?
So I'm originally from Togo, West Africa. I speak French, and I joined the Navy 8 years ago.
Okay, so you have to explain how a Togoan who has a French background ended up in the U.S. Navy.
So basically, when I came to this country, let's say 13 years ago, my first goal was to go to college. So while in college, I met a recruiter who told me, hey, brother, do you know that if you join the U.S. Navy, you can pursue your career, travel around the world, and also be a citizen? I said, really? He said, yes. I'm like, you know what? Let me try to join this country, serve this country, challenge myself, and be part of something bigger than myself.
I love it. And you got that education. What did you get your degree in?
So far I got 2 bachelor degrees, one in psychology and one in business management. Last month I just finished my master's in HR.
Okay. Congratulations. Now, how many countries have you been to?
So far I've been to 44 countries. My last duty station was in Japan, Sasebo, Japan, where I love it. I met new people, talk to people, exchange of culture. I love it.
I understand you met somebody very countries. Tell me about that.
So on my first deployment, we went to Italy, Sicilia, and I met my wife over there. And we've been together 8 years now since my first deployment. We had 2 beautiful daughters, and yes, thank you to the Navy.
Exactly. So I'm going to ask you, so out of all the 44 countries, I think I know the answer. What is your favorite country?
Italy.
Where he met his wife. Thank you so much. So you are stationed as a recruiter.
Yes. Like I said, the only thing I can do to give back to the Navy is back. So I choose to be a recruiter. Right now I'm a recruiter in Brooklyn. If anybody of you have time, you can stop by at my office. I'm going to give you all the opportunity benefit the Navy can give you.
Oh, you can join the Navy and get an education, potentially meet your spouse, and be on Sail 4250. That's the biggest thing.
That's the biggest thing. That's true.
Gary, do you have any questions for Petty Officer Amano?
Thank you very much. You know, I wonder, being fluent in the French language, has that been an asset, and has he been able to use that on behalf of the U.S. Navy, being able to speak French?
Do you get a chance to use French in the U.S. Navy?
Yes, I actually do. On my first deployment, everywhere we go, if they speak French, they let me translate everything they got.
Oh, that's fun.
Yes. And they also pay for extra. If you speak another language, you take the test, you pass, they pay you for that.
Oh, even better. Gary, if we have a couple of minutes, I just want to ask him about his uniform, because this is something that
Sure.
I am learning about. What's the difference between a petty officer or a sergeant? Okay, so tell me about your uniform.
So my uniform, right? This is the neckerchief. This is my rank. That's E5. That's 2. And this is my job. In the Navy, I'm an engineer. I work on the engine, big engines. So this represents my engines. This is my personal awards and the collective awards. This is a surface warfare. This basically means I'm a recruiter. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And the hat.
The hat, yeah. Simple. It comes with the uniform, ma'am.
Iconic sailor hat, right? So thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I have to think that it takes a little work to keep that uniform sparkling clean and white as he is. And with 2 master's degrees or master's degrees and a master's degrees, I think the future is bright for this young man, his wife, and their 2 children. Tell them thank you very much.
I agree. Thank you.
All right, well, we're going to move on to another ship that we saw on the parade yesterday, the Juan Bautista Cambioso from the Dominican Republic. She comes out of the Santo Domingo. It's a 3-masted barkentine, and she sure looked regal sailing up and down the Hudson River yesterday. So let's take a little look and visit with the Juan Bautista Cambioso and find out the importance of her name.
In 2009 in Bulgaria, the Juan Bautista Cambioso was launched, while later acquired in 2018 by the Dominican Republic. This vessel was launched in a year full of excitement, including the miracle on the Hudson. A potential disaster was turned into a heroic display of skill and composure when Captain Sully Sullenberger safely landed his plane after a bird had striked its engines. It would be dubbed at the time the Miracle on the Hudson. Now, that same year was also the inauguration of Barack Obama as our first black president, the 44th U.S. president. The same time that we had our first black president, we also have the founding of Uber in San Francisco, and the blockbuster movie Avatar premiered. In that same year, Facebook tried to acquire Twitter with an offer of $500 million worth in company stock, but Twitter turned them down.
And here comes Spain's magnificent Juan Sebastian de Elcano, named for the explorer who completed the first circumnavigation of the globe. Nearly a century after she first set sail, she continues to carry Spain's proud maritime heritage to ports around the world, including New York, for America's 250th birthday. With 4 towering masts, a length of more than 370 feet, and nearly 400 sailors and midshipmen aboard, she's one of the largest and most impressive ships in the parade of sail. Over her lifetime, Elcano has sailed more than 2.3 million miles. One final bit of history. Every Spanish naval officer spends part of their training aboard Juan Sebastian de Elcano, making her one of Spain's most treasured symbols of seamanship and national pride. All right, well, from the Spanish tall ship, we're going to talk to an expert on all things tall ships, Peter Sweetser. Peter served the United States Marine Corps, and he serves as a liaison for the New York Yacht Club in the military. The New York Yacht Club welcomes Coast Guard, Marines, naval officers, and of course Army officers as well, Air Force, all military people that are members of the Yacht Club. And he coordinates different activities, and he's quite the aficionado when things come to models of ships. And he had a really cool tall ship model to show us and explain what goes on with these boats, so equating what we saw in the water yesterday with what people have in their offices and their homes. So let's take a look and hear from Peter Sweetser. Welcome back to our celebration of America's 250th. I'm Gary Jobson, and we're honored today to have Peter Sweetser with us. Peter is a veteran of being in the United States Marine Corps, and since that time he's become quite the aficionado of all things maritime. Particularly, he is a model maker and on a committee at the New York Yacht Club to oversee the work they do, and models at the New York Yacht Club are really important, particularly their America's Cup collection. Peter, here's a tall ship that you've been working on this model for some time, and then just a couple quick questions. How in the world do these boats get steered? How do you aim them in what direction and course you want to take?
Well, Gary, the steering is actually the easy part once you know where the wind's coming from on a square rigger like this, because they only really go downwind. Now, that doesn't mean dead downwind, but it means they gotta pretty much be going with the wind to work. But when you are in that position, there's a rudder right here that's controlled from inside this cabin right here, which protects the helmsman, and away they go.
And would there be more than one helmsman, more than one person steering?
It could be. Some of the wheels on some of the bigger ships like this actually have 2 sets of spokes that come outside, and they could have as many as 4 people on the helm at the same time.
Well, it's certainly been impressive with the tall ships coming up and down New York Harbor and the Hudson River. It's impressive. And I think one of the things that people are astounded about is how many sails these vessels have. You know, we're used to sloops racing with a headsail and a mainsail, and here there's a lot of sails. And what's intriguing to me, these sails all have a different name, which you have to learn. So we have the royals, we have the gallants, we have the mainsail, we have the spanker and the skysails. So where do all these sails go, and how in the world do you memorize all these sails?
Well, the truth is, Gary, I don't, because I can't remember all of them. But if you want to do it professionally, you learn. So let's just go through that if you'd like to see where they are. First of all, we ought to start with the fact that this is called a ship-rigged ship. Ship has 2 meanings. A ship is a vessel that is too big to be on other ships.
Okay.
Once you're a ship, there are various rigs with the mast and the sails. This is called a ship or a full rig ship. So that means it has 3 masts. This is the foremast, the mainmast, and this is the mizzenmast. Those are standard all ships would describe. Even even boats that might have 5 or 6 will just have several mainmasts. The sails, let's start from the bow again. This is the lower one right here, which would drop off of this spar right here. This is called a yardarm.
Yep.
And the sail would drop below that. Then that's the main course. This is the topsail. This is the top gallant would go right here. This would be a royal right here. On the mainmast, it has the same thing. You'd have the main course, the main topsail go in here, the main top gallant goes here, the royal goes here, and on this one, there's actually a skysail for obvious reasons. That's pretty high up on these boats.
How high up would one of our tall ships be?
This model, which is a generic model from the early 20th century to late 19th century, that is the 1900s to the late 1800s, this was probably 300 feet long, so these could very well be 200, 250 feet high.
So it must have been pretty scary going up the rig out in the yardarm.
Well, imagine that in a seaway with the seas rolling you back and forth. So the answer is very scary. I suspect that they put the youngest and most gullible sailor up on the top for that purpose.
Well, there's an old expression, one hand for yourself and one hand for the ship.
It's absolutely true. That prevents a lot of errors. The last one, which is the unusual for the ship rigged, is the sail that goes right in here. And this is what's called a gaff-shaped sail. But on a ship, it's called a spanker, S-P-A-N-K-E-R. That helps balance the helm. That's its real purpose. It doesn't do much for driving the ship forward, but it does do a great deal for helping the helmsman keep from having to rotate back and forth.
So let's say you're out in the middle of the ocean and it starts getting really windy, 40 miles an hour or even more. Do you reduce sail? You take some of them down? How do you handle it?
You absolutely do, but you might find that you sometimes, depending upon the sea and the wind, because you have to gauge them together, you might take the lower ones down and take the course up for 2 reasons. One is those are the biggest sails. Secondly, you can see better. Because imagine if you were back here trying to see a sail that's lower here, here, and here, you'd barely be able to see what's out in front of you and what's coming at you. The other thing that you might do is you might then take down your absolute topsails, because anything up high has more of a force in a leaning moment, which makes the ship, I should say, heel to the left or to the right more by having from the force at the top.
So there's stability in the ship to keep it from rolling over.
It absolutely is. That's the ballast that's usually in the bottom. And on a cargo ship, which is what this is, they would have put their heaviest cargo down low.
How many crew would be on a vessel like this?
I'm not exactly sure, but I would think that this vessel probably had a crew of 30.
Well, not too many, so a lot of room for cargo, not so much room for all the people.
They'd all be, there wouldn't be anybody below deck here. The cargo would be all friggin' right up to the top, and they'd all be forward here. The captain might have a cabin back here that is shown by these skylights right there. But, and then there'd be an area here for the main galley where everybody would eat. The rest of it would be cargo because that's what pays for the voyage.
No motors. So everything's handled by hand. They did have some winches that could give them a little bit of extra leverage.
Not many. Everybody bent onto a line, went through a turning block in order to take a downward pull on the sail or the spar and turn it into a horizontal pull on the deck.
So it must have been a lot of work. Now, on these ships, did they stand watches, 4 hours on, 4 hours off, or how did the routine work on board the boat?
4 hours on, 4 hours off is a current naval and also commercial, and even, as you well know, on racing boats, 4 hours on, 4 hours off. with some adaptations. But I would think it might be possible that except in very rough weather, they'd be 5 or 6 hours on.
Oh.
Because these were a lot of work and the guys needed rest.
What's the motion aboard this boat? Is it violent? Is it smooth? If you're on board the boat out in the ocean, what's it feel like?
That's a good question. If you haven't been there, I know you have. A lot depends more on the sea state than it does on the speed of the wind. Because if you have a sea state that has high distances between the trough and the peak of the wave, you could be falling off a wave coming in front of you, and it crashes. And down below is, again, you know so well, it's like sleeping inside a drum.
So it'd be very dangerous to be out here on the bowsprit in waves like that.
Highly, highly recommended not to be there. Now, in the days of the 19th century, they didn't work with rigs and harnesses like we do today. They just walked out there, and the answer is they lost people.
Wow, the sad thing.
Yep.
Now, I went out on a bowsprit on the Stad Amsterdam, but I had a safety harness on. I wanted to be careful, and I also got to the top of the mast.
Did you really?
Yeah, and I had a safety harness up there as well. And at the Stad Amsterdam, we were going downwind with westerlies across the ocean, and the boat would do this very slow roll. We're going downwind, back and forth, and I timed the roll, and then I tried to figure out how many rolls did we do in this transatlantic crossing. So it took us 14 days on the Stad to get from New York to Cowes and the Isle of Wight, and I calculated we did 119,000 rolls of this vessel crossing the Atlantic Ocean. It was great fun, and we were mighty glad to get there.
Well, I admire the fact that you're willing to do that. I've never done it. But I will say this, and I also guess that you would agree, at first, it's scary, but then you learn to trust your boat, which is probably the most important thing to any sailor on any size boat. It's not going to do something that you don't expect it to do. And on those kinds of rolls, you get used to the back and the forth.
That was great fun.
I bet it was.
You get kind of the cadence going. All right, well, we have a number of tall ships here in the harbor, and maybe we can just go run through them and maybe have some comments on each one as we go through.
Okay.
This is really exciting to have these tall ships in New York Harbor, and we're going to go through a laundry list of some of these vessels, starting with the Amerigo Vespucci. This boat is from Italy and was first commissioned back in 1931.
And Gary, what's to see right here is that this is a ship-rigged ship, just like we discussed here. So you can see the 3 masts, forward, foremast, mainmast, and then the mizzenmast, and you notice that the spanker is up there. You'll also notice, if you can see in the depth, that the lowest sail on the mizzenmast is not rigged. And that's just because the captain is deciding how best to balance the rig. So there are all the sails that we looked at when we described this ship right here.
From the time it hauls its anchor up and starts sailing to get all those sails hoisted up and set, how long does it take?
Well, you're not talking minutes. You're talking probably several hours. Because remember, for most of these, there are no automation to it. There are no electric winches or anything of that sort. And also, as you can imagine, those sails at the top are difficult to pull up because of the amount of line and the friction. And the bottom ones, it's difficult because of the weight of the big sails. So it takes a bit of time.
How much do some of these sails weigh?
I would say that the main mast, the middle one, the main course, which is the bottom one, I would say that probably takes 6 or 8 guys to carry that.
Wow. They're heavy.
They're heavy.
Hundreds and hundreds of pounds.
Yeah.
Maybe even 1,000 pounds. Well, right now, looking at the Vespucci, it's not going particularly fast, and the wind looks kind of light. But in a stiff breeze, how fast can it go?
I don't really know how fast they can go, but my guess would be 7 or 8 or 9 miles per hour.
Okay. Our next vessel is the Air Libertad that comes all the way from Buenos Aires. And of course, I love the name Buenos Aires, which means good air.
Well, this is a case, I've got another of the ships that are out in the New York harbor that is a ship rigged, like we've been talking about before. And the reason I did was because this angle shows something else that we didn't talk about, and that is, in addition to the sails attached directly to the three masts, you have jibs forward and staysails in between. It is absolutely a practice of these types of ships, arguably almost every boat built, to, when the weather allows, put up every piece of cloth, a form of a sail, a name for a sail, that you can possibly carry to get more speed.
So you get every sail adds incrementally a little more speed.
A little more speed.
Our next ship is the U.S. Coast Guard Eagle. This is a training ship for the Coast Guard Academy based out of New London, Connecticut. And it's an interesting vessel because it was built in Germany in the 1930s, and we acquired the boat as war reparations after World War II. And the Eagle has a specific category. It's a bark.
It's a bark, Gary, because at first glance, it looks just like what we were showing before and what our model. But at a second glance, you'll see that the aft mast, the mizzen, has no square sails on it. It only has what are called fore and aft sails for obvious reasons. In fact, the lowest one is still called the spanker, and it's exactly what's on the ship, but in this case, nothing forward of it. And that's an important distinction, and the reason they do that, it would help them go closer to the wind when they were sailing than they could with all square sails.
I can't help but notice that it's got a huge American flag on the after end of the vessel.
They don't want to be mistaken for anybody else.
And it's got the familiar Coast Guard logo in the bow of the vessel. And I find it intriguing, Peter, that every cadet that attends the U.S. Coast Guard Academy spends some time in the summers on the Eagle. Yeah. So to them, the Coast Guard, sail training is still an important thing.
There's no question about it, Gary. There's a very small likelihood that any of those young men and women will actually ever go on duty on a vessel like this. But the experience of handling those sails, just like they did 100 years ago, helps their leadership training. It helps their understanding of how these boats actually work under sail. That sort of information can be very valuable as they go into their career.
Leadership, and I have to think a lot of teamwork too.
Very much so, I would bet.
All right, let's go on to our next vessel. Our next vessel is Marcia. It comes from Romania, and it too is a bark.
It too, indeed. The reason why we're looking at this again, number one, it's because it is here in New York Harbor. Our viewers are going to have a chance to possibly see this at sail, but it also helps to now see the different sails that we were talking about. And just to quickly repeat, you're looking to the left, you're looking to the foresail, and the jibs out in front, the square rigs, the staysails in between, the square rig sails, the staysails in between, and then once again, the mizzen mast with no square sails, but the fore and aft sails at the back end of the boat.
So the captain has to keep a good eye on the weather, because if a storm's coming in or a squall, they're going to need to furl some of these sails up in a hurry.
And these crews can do it pretty quickly, but storms move pretty quickly too.
So it's a sense of urgency.
I bet there would be.
Okay, next up. Our next vessel is Gloria from Cartagena, Colombia. It's a little bit smaller vessel at 212 feet, and it sure looks magnificent sailing along here.
It absolutely does, and the reason why we're looking at this particular one is because it's unlikely in New York Harbor that our viewers will get a chance to see a vessel of that size with probably every sail in their inventory is up flying and full. And you can see by that big flag, which probably takes a pretty good breeze to get it to stretch out that far. It's a breezy day, and they're moving pretty well.
Well, I think if you like sailing, this would be a good day to be out there.
That would indeed.
So, Gloria, perfect. And finally, we come along to the Juan Sebastian Elcano. This is another 371-foot vessel sailing away from here right now, looking kind of gallant, and the rig's a little bit different.
This is, as is often in the case of these types of vessels, captains and boat owners would change the rigs somewhat because of performance or their needs. In this case, what we see is a foresail that is square rigged. You see off to the left,
Yep.
It's on the top of what are foremast in this particular case. The other three masts are all fore and aft rigged. You notice they're all gaffed just like the spanker that we looked at. And that's the way it goes all the way forward. And there was simply a matter of a changing need and performance standards. So that's why when you look at these boats that are in the harbor, at the time when they're able to get up their sails up, many of them will look a little different. And the answer is they're all basically ships, but they're rigged differently.
Well, this one, it seems to me, should be able to sail a lot higher, closer to the wind.
That's exactly right.
So they reconfigured the boat because they wanted to go to windward better.
Because their route was going to be to windward more than other routes.
Well, Peter, that was really helpful, getting a good look at these boats and describing the different rigs and how they sail. So thank you very much for taking the time and joining us today. For Peter Sweetser, I'm Gary Jobson, and we'll be back. I kind of like the discussion there that you have the right sail combination for the route that you're going to sail. In other words, what direction the wind's coming from or how strong the wind is going to be. Well, earlier I had introduced the boat, the Juan Bautista Cambioso, and we ran the wrong package. The Juan Sebastian de Elcano popped up instead. Our mistake. Sorry about that. So in fairness to the people from the Dominican Republic, here's the look at the package that originally hoped to show the Juan Bautista Cambioso. That's a lot of Juans. Representing the Dominican Republic is Juan Bautista Cambioso, named for the founder of the Dominican Navy. This is the ship's first ever visit to New York Harbor, making it an especially proud moment for the thousands of Dominican families celebrating along the shoreline. At 177 feet long, she's one of the smaller ships in the parade, carrying a crew of about 50 sailors and cadets. Despite her size, she plays a vital role in training the Dominican Republic's future naval officers. One more interesting fact, Juan Bautista Cambioso is remembered for helping secure the nation's independence in 1844. All right, we got the right package there with the introduction that happened earlier. Our next vessel is the Boule Poulet. Boule Poulet means good hen or good chicken, kind of an interesting name. And it's a smaller vessel, 123 feet long. It comes from France, specifically Brest, which, by the way, is a great part of France for sailing, noted for its strong winds. And it was here 50 years ago. This vessel was built back in 1932. And interestingly, it's a replica of a cod fishing schooner. So let's take a little look at the Belle Poulet.
In 1932, the Belle Poulet was built in France as a replica of a cod fishing schooner. Now, she was built during a time of the Great Depression, in which 1 in 4 Americans lacked work. In this same year, Franklin Delano Roosevelt will be elected, defeating Herbert Hoover. In 1932, one of the most famous kidnapping cases took place when the son of aviator Charles Lindbergh was kidnapped. His disappearance was followed by a ransom for $50,000. Unfortunately, his son was not returned alive. In the aftermath of this crime, which became notorious, kidnapping would become a federal offense. Related to this aviation theme, we do see Amelia Earhart becoming the first female aviator to make a solo, non-stop transatlantic flight. This happens 5 years to the date that Charles Lindbergh had accomplished the same thing. Now, the same year that we have this amazing technology happening with aviation, we also have Radio City Music Hall opening up.
France is proudly represented by Belle Poulet, a graceful naval training ship whose history stretches from World War II to the present day. She continues to train young French officers while celebrating the enduring friendship between France and the United States. Though just 123 feet long, Belle Poulet carries a crew of 20 officers and sailors and remains one of the French Navy's most recognizable sailing vessels. A wonderful piece of history. During World War II, Belle Poulet survived 2 bombings before returning to service, a remarkable chapter in the life of this historic ship. Well, for a vessel that's about 90 years old, she still looks good today, sailing on the Hudson River. And she didn't have any motors going. She was just sailing along, and that boat sails beautifully and efficient. And you can see why the U.S. Navy 60 years ago and as recently as a year ago said, it's a beautiful vessel. And I think the French got to feel real proud about that. Okay, we're going to continue on with a vessel from Germany named the Gork Fock. This vessel was built in 1958 and replaced a previous vessel also with the same name that was built in 1933, which was one of the 5 barks that were the Germans built and were taken over by war reparations. And this vessel went to the Soviet Union. And anyway, it was long gone, and the Germans said, well, we want our vessel back. So they built a replacement in 1958. So let's take a look at the Gork Fock.
In 1958, the German bark tall ship, the Gork Fock, was launched that year. Now, 1958 was an exciting year when we think about NASA. That year, President Dwight D. Eisenhower and the U.S. Congress passed legislation to create NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which would be responsible for coordinating America's activities in space. This was very much part of what would become the space race. NASA was created as a response to the Soviet Union's launch of its first satellite, the Sputnik 1. Priding itself on being at the forefront of technology, the United States immediately began developing a response that would signal the start of what became known as the U.S.-Soviet space race. Now, while this was taking place well above Earth's levels, we also have Elvis Presley being inducted into the U.S. Army. In March of that year, he started his day as the king of rock and roll, but ended it as a lowly buck private in the United States Army. And he received what may be considered the most well-publicized haircut in the history of the armed forces.
My name is Elmar Bornkessel, Captain and the Commanding Officer of sail training ship Gorch Fock from the German Navy. Gorch Fock was a poet. His original name was Johann Kienau. He pretty much published all his books under his pseudonym Gorch Fock. The name was not chosen by the Nazis. It was chosen by the democratic government in 1932. And that is the reason why we still allowed to keep this name as the name for the sail training ship of the Federal Republic of Germany. And we are very proud to carry this name. The history of the sister ship is very special. The first sister ship was built in Germany. It was the Gorch Fock 1 in 1933. After Gorch Fock 1 was built, the need for more sailing ships was there in the German Navy. That was 1936, where the Horst Wessel was built, which is now the Eagle. 1937, the Albert Leo Schlageter, which is now the Sarkisch from Portugal. And the fourth one was built, but it was already designated for Romania, the Mircea, because Romania was at the time part of the Axis, so partner of Germany. And there are four. Of course, after World War II, Germany had to give all the ships as a war prize to the United States. The Gorch Fock 1 was sunk in the vicinity of Stralsund, was salvaged by the Russians, and she's now a museum ship in Germany, and we have just 4 active sister ships. The decision was made then in Germany after we were allowed to have armed forces again, and we got a navy in 55, that Germany would like to have a sailing ship. And since the plans and the design was very good, the German government made the decision we take the plans from the Albert Leo Schlageter and the Horst Wessel in order to build the Gorch Fock 2. And that's the reason why we as sailing ship Gorch Fock exist right now. And when we started our voyage in Kiel on the 7th of April, which is quite a long time ago, we had a challenging and long voyage across the Atlantic. It took us 21 days to sail with the trade winds from Las Palmas, Gran Canaria to Bermuda. And that was a very interesting but also challenging journey for us. The maximum speed for this ship under sails is roughly about 17 to 18 knots. But that's just under stormy conditions where we have really bad weather, strong winds, then we are able to make 17 to 18 knots. But that's a rare occasion. And under engine we are able to make approximately 12 knots. The Five Sister race was conducted the first and last time in 1976 from Bermuda to Newport, Rhode Island, but it was not finished. It was terminated since there was a collision between 2 of the sister ships. And in the moment of the collision, Gorch Fock was in the lead. So we won the trophy, but it's now our goal, of course, to defend the trophy. So we conduct the race from New York to Boston. Sailing from New York to Boston is very special, so we are really happy to conduct the race for sail to 50. For me, the most important thing is not winning the trophy. Of course, I would like to win the trophy. The crew would like to win the trophy, but doing it again. That is the most important thing, that these 4 sister ships assemble together and conduct the race, which was the last time conducted for the 200th anniversary of the United States. That is the big thing for me, and I think also for the other captains and the other crews. We teach how to sail, but that's not the important thing that the cadets have to learn. Here it's more about camaraderie, teamwork, courage, resilience, and I think there is no better place in the whole world where you can pretty much teach these goals than on a sail training ship. And especially for the future naval officers, it's important that they learn these things in a maritime environment. And a sailing ship like Gorch Fock is actually made for this. And if you make it here in Gorch Fock, then you're pretty much ready to go to take every job in the German Navy.
I'm Lieutenant Meyer, the navigation officer of sail training ship Gorch Fock, and I'm going to show you a few highlights on this ship. We are here at the chart house. This is the place where our navigator works. Here you can see one of our paper charts. This is very old school, but the paper charts are still in use. There you can see a sextant. These things is very important to get a position. You can use it to shoot stars, and then you can calculate with the angle of the stars and to the earth and find the position. The bell is original and it was built in 1958. Yeah, and you can see it, it's freshly polished and it's same beautiful like the ship. Normally when we stay at sea, we need to ring the bell every half hour, and that's the watch for the sailors. Every ship needs to have one of these bells. The figurehead in front of the ship is an albatross. It's a beautiful, huge bird, and the bird is flying long distances over the ocean.
There are a lot of similarities between all the tall ships and especially the sister ships. Of course, every ship has a little different focus on training and the way we do training. And here, sail training is for us important and is key for everything. And I think that makes Gorch Fock a little bit special. But we have more in common with the other ships than things that divide us. We all know that the 4th of July is a special day for the United States of America. And to sail down the Hudson River, to pass the Statue of Liberty, it's something special also for us.
I must say, I endorse the idea of having a race with these tall ships, which are going to start, I believe, on Thursday, July 9th, off New York, all the way up to Boston. So if you're in the south end of Long Island or off Newport or Block Island, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, Cape Cod, you might want to go out in your boat and see these tall ships going by. And you can be sure the crews will be working hard, because who wouldn't want to win that race? We'd like to thank EarthCam over the past couple days for these great pictures that we've been able to see. So EarthCam, thank you very much. And with that, let's go back on the dock with Aya. And Aya, I have a question for you. What's the vibe been on the Intrepid Pier here the last couple days you've been down there?
It is so much fun. We've got kids running by. We've got veterans coming and sitting down at our tables and sharing their stories. It's incredible. I say to anybody who's in the area, just come on down. If you've never been to the Intrepid Museum, this is the time to come on this celebration day. But if you've been a few times, I can guarantee that you've never seen these tall ships right here moored, ready for you to come and interact and go exploring, which is what I'm going to do next.
Have you had a chance to go look at the Concorde, the supersonic transport passenger jet that's on the pier?
So incredibly, I took some pictures of it, and I didn't realize originally yesterday that where we were sitting underneath in the shaded area was the wingspan of the Concorde. So that's another thing that most people will never get a chance to experience, right? You're sitting directly underneath the Concorde. And I see some stairs going in. I'm hoping that we'll have a chance to go in and explore, but if not, I get to say I saw the Concorde up close and personal.
Well, I did too. I got to fly on it one time when it was flying. I went from New York to Paris, and it was quite extraordinary because we flew at 60,000 feet, and we were doing twice the speed of sound, and it was all very comfortable. And we landed in Paris 3.5 hours after taking off from JFK. My United flights since that time have taken a little longer, about 7 or 8 hours to get to Europe. So the Concorde was a special thing. There were 20 of them built, used by British Air and Air France, and I think we miss them, but maybe we'll see something like that in the near future. So Aya, of all the things that you saw over the last few days,
I'd love to be on that.
I bet you would. Is there anything stand out, any of the vessels of more than the other?
I mean, I just love the story of the daughter and granddaughter who brought the pictures of their father and grandfather to show that 40 years ago today, they were on the Amerigo Vespucci, and it just happens to be our backdrop. I love the story of Petty Officer Amano, who is from a whole other country, who joined the U.S. Navy and met his wife, and he got an education. I mean, these are the stories that make America great, right? These are the stories that continue year after year, getting passed down oral tradition, and it just shows you how amazing being a part of the naval fleet and the military branch of the United States government can really change your life.
I enjoyed the family that you met with, the two young boys and the daughter in the stroller. You know, those boys are old enough that they'll remember when they were here. So 50 years from now, for the 300th, they could say, oh yeah, I was on the Intrepid dock. Of course, I was only 5 years old, but I remember it.
And if they don't remember it, we have it recorded on tape, which is even better for them.
All right. Well, we get to do this again tomorrow, and we have more packages and people to talk to, and you'll be with us down on the dock, and I'm sure you're going to introduce us to some more interesting people. So Aya, thank you very much, and look forward to working with you tomorrow. So that's our report here today. We have Admiral Dixon Smith coming in studio tomorrow. We have some great packages, including a fascinating race of tall ships, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow.